Chapter 821-Victory. It's still fighting. Kizaru looked at the firelight in front of him, and he said slowly as there were bursts of sounds coming from his ears. 10 days and 10 nights, this is the 10th night. What I didn't expect was that the two guys, Akainu and Aokiji, were still in the middle of a fight. Are they really unbeatable, Xiaoqiang? Still, the willpower of the two is too strong. If it were you, you would have surrendered. Li Ang glanced at Kizaru and said bluntly, with no sign of doubt in his tone. Why am I already surrendering? Kizaru couldn't help but retorted, if it were me, I wouldn't have to fight for so long, and I would defeat the enemy directly. Would I surrender? Why don't I recommend you try it when the two of them are healed? Li Ang showed a smile and said slowly. This. Kazuna was speechless and chose to remain silent. 337. Seeing that both Akainu and Aokiji can use the fruit to awaken, how could he dare to act rashly? Is this not courting death? He still has a long way to go before the awakening of the fruit. Since then, he has faced the Aokiji and the Kiwi who have awakened from the fruit. Therefore, Li Ang said that he was completely unable to refute it. It looks good. After Li Ang finished speaking, he stopped talking and looked at the battlefield ahead. His views on Akainu and Aokiji are quite high, and being able to persist in the battle for 10 days and 10 nights is enough to show their determination to win. Of course, in terms of protracted warfare, no one can be stronger than Li Ang. His physical strength is inexhaustible, and naturally he does not need to worry at all. However, so far, there has not been anyone who can fight him for a long time. He can easily deal with every enemy, it is impossible to fight for such a long time. Even if the four emperors are the enemy, there will be no exception. Unless the four emperors came out in full force, they all united to attack him. Perhaps, he will feel a little pressure in his heart, and it will not be a problem to fight with the other party for 3 days and 3 nights. It is still a bit difficult for one person to fight against all the members of the four emperors. Even Li Ang is not sure that he can win 100%. But no matter how bad it is, it will not be killed at the hands of others. If the ability is used well, it does not seem to be particularly difficult to summon the Sea Kings to come over and destroy the four emperors. Boom! A loud bang pulled Li Ang's thoughts back. Front. The battle between the red dog and the green pheasant has entered the point of white hot, the bloodshot eyes of the two people spread, and they have not really rested for 10 days and 10 nights. Every time they fainted, they appeared because they were too tired. His head was congested, but he still couldn't win from the opponent's hand. Both of them had scars of varying degrees on their bodies. Relatively speaking, Akainu's is lighter, and Aokiji's entire leg was burned by magma, and even if the fruit ability is used, it still cannot be repaired. Die! Akainu's eyes bulged, he shouted loudly, and took the initiative to attack. He dragged his heavy body, arrived in front of Aokiji, and engaged in close-range hand-to-hand combat. Lava appeared in his fists, and he used the magma to wrap his fists and attacked fiercely. Boom! Aokiji was forced to retreat several steps, his face was pale, and ice cubes appeared in his fists, covering the armed color and domineering, and bombarded Akainu's head. However, Akainu avoided it with difficulty, his lips were white, and he was entangled with Aokiji. You come and go, like a turn-based battle. Pieces of ice cubes flew towards Li Ang's location. The golden light flashed in Kyabu's hands, and he slapped it casually, smashing all the ice cubes into pieces. When are these two going to fight? Chapter 821-Victory. NLT, 33 and GT. When are these two going to fight? He looked at Akainu and Aokiji and continued talking. Tonight, the results will come out. Li Ang said with an expressionless face. I feel like that too. Kizaru nodded in agreement and said. Li Ang glanced at Kizaru without saying anything, and looked at the battlefield in front of him. At this time, Akainu and Aokiji are also powerful crossbows, not as strong as before. After all, not everyone is Li Ang, with physical strength that will not be exhausted. As ordinary human beings, Akainu and Aokiji, even if they are generals, their strength is very powerful. But after 10 days and 10 nights of fighting, they were exhausted. In other words, they have long been exhausted, but every time they fall, they wake up with a certain fighting ability. At this time, they will fight again, and the fight will continue. Boom, boom, boom. A hot and cold environment is completely united with the entire island. Because of the terrifying power of the two people, including the awakening of the devil fruit, etc., the environment of the island has been completely changed to zero. A cold, a searing heat. The terrifying sound of the two touching each other was breathtaking. Too terrifying. The momentum is mighty, and the entire island trembles in the collision between the two. There were countless traces of cracks on the ground, but it was directly frozen by Aokiji's ice. The temperature in the sky changes endlessly. Sometimes it's cold, sometimes it's hot, it's really unpredictable. Kill. The gentle Aokiji also turned red, staring at Akainu, chasing and killing, holding ice knives in both hands, covering the armed color, and slashing at Akainu's waist. Boom. Akainu's left hand was covered with armed color, blocking Aokiji's sword. However, Aokiji stepped back and stabbed directly with the ice blade. Not good. Akainu's pupils shrank, and as he watched the ice blade approaching his heart, an unprecedented sense of crisis enveloped his atrium. Boom. He suddenly erupted a terrifying magma that directly enveloped Aokiji's body. Zzz. The scorching aura made it difficult for the green pheasant to resist, so he had to retreat, roll on the ground, and use the ice cubes on the ground to reduce his burning sensation. Good chance. How could Akainu let go of this time? His eyes flickered, magma appeared in his fist, the huge magma mass, black smoke came out, and the breath was scorching hot. He was directly bombarded by Aokiji's body. Aokiji's eyes widened, unable to resist, he watched helplessly as he was hit by Akainu's move. Boom. 4.0. A loud bang. Black smoke rose up, a huge pit appeared on the ground, and the ice cubes melted into water. The cracks on the surface are still very obvious in everyone's sight. Akainu won. Kazuna was a little surprised and asked. After 10 days and 10 nights of fighting, it suddenly came to an end, which still made him uncomfortable. But it is also reasonable. Neither of them are machines. After 10 days and 10 nights of fighting, even if they were robots, they would have already run out of energy. Cough cough. Akainu spit out a mouthful of blood, staring at the pit ahead, looking for the shadow of the green pheasant, with a solemn expression, but with a somewhat excited look. He was sure that he had definitely hit the green pheasant just now. If nothing else, this battle is a victory or defeat, and it has already been decided here. NLT, 34 and GT. Chapter 822-New Admiral. Punk Hasad. Now, for the night. Ylang star is thin, a round crescent moon, emitting a hazy halo. The entire sea area was silent in the darkness. The black smoke dissipated, Akainu looked at the green pheasant in the pit ahead, heaved a sigh of relief, and slumped on the ground, finally being able to relax. The green pheasant, unable to move, fainted in the pit with a weak breath. Now he is almost dying. At this time, if Akainu makes another move, there is absolutely a 100% chance that he can kill the green pheasant. However, Akainu glanced at Liang, who was not far away, and suppressed the idea. Who knows, this monster will be rough on himself. He didn't think that he could compete with Liang. Even at his peak, he was not Liang's opponent when he had sufficient physical strength. Not to mention, his physical strength is very weak now. Want to fight against a terrifying enemy like Liang? I'm afraid not, it was suppressed when Liang raised his hand. Even the yellow monkey next to Liang could slap him casually, fearing that he would die. Now his state has been weak to the extreme. Compared with Qingzi, he is 108 better, but it is not optimistic, and the injuries on both of them cannot be ignored. In particular, exhaustion is very harmful to the human body. Mr. Liang. Akainu looked at Liang's direction with difficulty, couldn't help but said. I know. Liang nodded casually, not caring who won. He walked to Aokiji's side, checked it a little, and after confirming that the opponent did not have the ability to continue fighting, he applied some healing methods to temporarily stabilize Aokiji's wound. This time, it's you who won. Liang stood up, looked at Akainu, and announced the result directly. Call. Akainu exhaled and lay heavily on the ground, his eyelids getting heavier. He persisted until the end, and was a little better than Aokiji. Although, this is not very big, but for the campaign marshal, this difference in strength is the most deadly. The key to whether a person can become a marshal or not. Kizaru came gradually, looked at the two fainted, and said, take them back. Otherwise. Liang glanced at the surrounding scene and said with emotion, it's really amazing that someone has made the environment like this abruptly. Kizaru also nodded, and had to admit that in this battle, no matter who won or lost, it was expected. The fight is so fierce that any side that wins will be recognized by him. They persisted for 10 days and 10 nights, and they couldn't be more tired, but they still persevered. If Aokiji hadn't been hit by this trick, I'm afraid, he would still be at a stalemate with Akainu. But that's fine, if the battle is over, he won't have to guard here. Huang Yuan smiled and said, then send them back. Let's go, I'm ready to go back too. Liang nodded and said. Immediately, Kizaru held a comatose general in one hand, turned into a ball of golden light, and disappeared directly in place. And here, Liang was left alone. He glanced back at the direction of the Caesars Institute, and then looked at the surrounding environment that had been severely changed. He let out a laugh, and with the movement of his footsteps, the whole person disappeared. This battle is over. The battle between Akainu and Aokiji, with Akainu as the winning side, ended as the final curtain. That night. Chapter 822-New Admiral. NLT, 35 and GT. That night. Liang and Kizaru once again crossed the Red Soil continent. Passed directly above the Holy Land Marijoa, without any scruples about the Tianlong people below. If you let them know, I'm afraid they will be furious. After all, they, who consider themselves noble, have yet to experience what it feels like to be stood on top of their heads by others. Liang and Kizaru, who also carried the red dog Aokiji, passed over their heads. Fortunately, they didn't find out. If they found out, it would cause some unnecessary troubles. Although Liang would not be in trouble, it was inevitable for Kizaru. In addition, although the Tianlong people did not find it, the 5 old stars still noticed it. If it wasn't for the existence of Liang, they would definitely have knocked down Kyabu. This is a blatant challenge to the majesty of the Tianlong people, and they dare to walk over the heads of the Tianlong people. But seeing Liang, they didn't dare to say a word. Wu Laoxing sighed, looking particularly helpless and aggrieved. Over the years, since Liang appeared, their mood has become very uncomfortable. All kinds of things, when it comes to Liang, they don't dare to act rashly. You know, they are the 5 old stars, the 5 most powerful people in the world. Excluding the king of the dragons, they are the rulers of the world. But in the face of Liang, they were like some small characters, and they didn't even have the courage to speak in front of each other. It's a failure. Wu Laoxing secretly sighed, thinking helplessly. Liang's strength is too strong, so that they can't have the idea of colliding with each other at all. Marin Vando. The yellow monkey brought the green pheasant and the red dog to the ground. Seeing that, a white fish maw appeared on the horizon, and the personnel in the Navy headquarters gradually became lively. Early in the morning, it is inevitable that many navies will exercise. So, they saw a shocking scene. The scene of Kizaru holding a general in one hand appeared in their sight. 10 days and 10 nights have passed, and the battle between General Akainu and General Aokiji has finally come to an end. My God, Who won in the end? I think General Aokiji's injury is relatively serious. It should be General Akainu won. Impossible, the injury of General Aokiji is more obvious, that's because of desperate efforts. Therefore, the chance of General Aokiji winning is obviously higher. Come on, stop guessing, we'll know the answer later. Now, with both of them in a coma, what can we infer? Quote. The entire Marin Fando was boiling. And Li Ang, quietly, has returned to his residence. Anyway, the reward for warring states should be in execution, and there is no need to remind the other party. In his opinion, warring states would definitely not offend himself for this trivial matter, which obviously outweighed the gains. The other side. Kizaru took the red dog and the green pheasant to the medical room. After handing the two to the doctor, he rushed to the Sengoku office alone. Who wins? Warring States stood by the window with his back to Kyabu and asked. Heard. Kizaru didn't hide it either, and explained the whole process of the battle at the moment. 10 days and 10 nights of battle, these two are fighting to the death. The people around the Warring States side that in his era, although he was not easy as a marshal, it was not as difficult as it is now. Garp has no intention of running, and Lieutenant General Crane is completely incompetent, and Zephyr has no intention of becoming a marshal either. Because of various reasons, the process of warring states becoming a marshal was quite smooth. And now, Akainu and Aokiji have been fighting to death, and it is too rare to be assigned the position of a marshal. And LT, 36 and GT. Chapter 823-Sensation. In the end, who wins? When asked this question, the warring states also raised his mind, looked at Kizaru, and asked. Akainu, Sakazuki. Huang Yuan took a deep breath and said truthfully. Sure enough. Warring states sighed and expressed deep regret. Not beyond his expectations, Akainu's winning rate is still very high. It is normal for Aokiji to lose. However, after being able to entangle with Akainu for 10 days and 10 nights, it is undeniable that Aokiji's strength is still very strong. So, Marshal of the Warring States, what is it now? Kazuna thought for a while and couldn't help but ask. From now on, I will replace Akainu to manage the naval headquarters. Until Akainu's injury recovers, I will officially hand over the position of Marshal to Akainu. Sengoku didn't think about it and said directly. This set of rhetoric, he has already prepared, but there is no chance to say it together. Okay, I see. Kazuna nodded and said. It is a fact that the Warring States period resigned from the position of Marshal. In this case, there must be a person to supplement the position of Marshal. And this candidate is the most suitable only to be screened among the generals. Proclaim it, it's not something to hide. Warring States waved his hand, looked at the window, and said. He was really out of the mood, and even the Aokiji, whom he looked at, was defeated by Akainu. And let Akainu have extreme thoughts, as a marshal. How can he be optimistic about the future of the Navy? However, facts are facts, and he has no right to change them. Only, accept the facts. Yes, Marshal. Kizaru took a deep breath, nodded solemnly, and gradually left the Warring States office. Looking at the back of Kizaru leaving, Warring States frowned, sighed for a long time, and shook his head helplessly. Akainu, as a marshal, perhaps, is what those people hoped. And as a mere naval marshal, he still has less right to speak. Those identities cannot be changed by identities. Rather, the bloodline. If he has the blood of Tianlong people, the right to speak is self-evident. After leaving the marshal's office, Kizaru directly dialed the phone bug and instructed a good man to describe what happened next. This matter, not only to let the people of the Navy headquarters know. You must also inform the real world. After all, this is the new marshal position. Naturally, there are people in the whole world who need to understand. Immediately, the newspaper appeared. Marin Fando was boiling, and all the navies received the news immediately. My God, Admiral Akainu, I'm going to be a marshal. No, now we have to call Admiral Akainu, Marshal Sakaski. Everyone, don't disturb the order. Marshal Sakaski is already a marshal. It seems that Admiral Aokiji lost. He lost to Marshal Sakaski, so he was given the position of marshal. I wonder if Marshal Sakaski can lead our naval headquarters to be more prosperous. This is necessary. Marshal Sakaski is strong and tough. With this kind of leader, we will be more confident when we charge. Quote. Chapter 823-Sensation. NLT, 37 and GT. Quote. There was a lot of talk, every navy was talking about it. Today, there is a terrifying news that broke out in Marin Van Dolce. The atmosphere of the entire Marin Vatican was completely detonated. Everyone knows that the latest news, the new marshal candidate, even if the Akainu general. From this moment on, everyone saw Akainu, and they could only shout after each other's name, adding the words of two marshals. And Akainu is just a code name for the general. For example, the yellow monkey is not called the yellow monkey, but his code name is called the yellow monkey. His name is Pelusolino. The same goes for Aokiji, and the same goes for Akainu. And after leaving the navy, or becoming a marshal, such a code name will also be meaningless. Everyone will only call names, not nicknames or anything. General Akainu, become a marshal. Everyone, shouted loudly. The atmosphere of Malinfando was hot, and Akainu and Aokiji, who were the parties, were in the medical room and were being treated. The two were in a coma, too tired. The previous battles could only be completed by relying on their strong willpower. Otherwise, he would have already lied down and could not stand up. At the same time, Kizaru instructed the manpower to spread the news of the replacement of the marshal of the naval headquarters on the sea. At the same time, many islands and all pirates received this news. What? The marshal of the navy headquarters has been replaced. Sengoku retired and Akainu takes over. If it were Akainu, this mad dog would probably kill us mercilessly, these pirates. This is not a good thing for us. However, the admiral has changed, which is not a good thing. It means that there will be a big move in the navy in the near future. Reform, there must be. The previous ones, I'm afraid, in Akainu, they will be replaced. However, it's not a good thing for us pirates anyway. Quote. Pirates and civilians all started a conversation. The common conclusion is that Akainu is far better as a marshal than Sengoku as a marshal. In the end, they still couldn't accept Akainu's absolute justice. I heard that General Akainu once saved people on an island by himself. But guess how much he spent? He killed tens of thousands of innocent people before he saved the people who made it to the island. Quote. Besides, some people threatened the navy with hostages, and Admiral Akainu immediately took action, ignoring the hostages, and killed each pirate group. This is too terrifying and extreme. In order to achieve the direction of justice in my heart, incarnating as Shira, I went all the way with blood. I don't deny that many people killed by Akainu deserve to die. But there are also many ordinary people he killed. I do think that General Akainu did the right thing. Quote. The sea was sensational, and not only the little pirates learned of this news. Together with the four emperors, Chiwahai and others, they have also received this news. What troubled the four emperors was that Akainu didn't play cards according to common sense. I'm afraid it will have a huge impact on their territory. The entire sea immediately boiled. Akainu, the matter of becoming a general, swept every corner of the world. The news about the retirement of the Warring States period and the rise of Akainu has almost monopolized the topic of discussion in the whole world these days. It all revolves around Akainu and the Navy headquarters. The news continued, and the parties were still in the medical room for treatment. In a short period of time, it is impossible for Akainu and Aokiji to recover. This time the battle between the two took too much physical and energy. If you want to recover, it will take at least half a month. Chapter 824-Recruit Generals. Marin Vando, in the room. Li Ang lay on the sofa, feeling the soft body in his arms, and said with a smile, "Did you miss me?" "Think." Hancock put his arms around Li Ang, leaning on the other's body, like a koala, wishing to hang in Li Ang's arms and feel the warm and familiar embrace. Li Ang went out for 10 days this time, but it made her think too much. Immediately, Li Ang felt the two soft balls, and his body reacted naturally. Hancock's pretty face blushed, and his beautiful eyes glanced at Li Ang shyly, his long eyelashes trembled, and his black hair fell vertically, scratching on Li Ang's neck. "Let me see if you haven't seen it for a while, have you still developed?" Li Ang smiled, his hands were restless, sliding on Hancock's body. Feeling that delicate and smooth skin makes him feel very good. Hancock's face turned red, and he didn't dare to look directly at Li Ang. After grabbing the two soft balls, Li Ang's eyes flickered, leaning against Hancock's small white jade ears, and blew, "It's really grown, you big goblin." The size of the body is even more attractive. Hancock blushed, buried his head in front of Li Ang, and said, "It hasn't been like this for more than 10 days. People, now I want to." "I know." Li Ang showed a smile and gave Hancock a princess hug. The two entered the room. Soon, there were bursts of intriguing sounds. Most of the day has passed. House. Hancock fell into a deep sleep and tossed for a long time, and she couldn't bear to surrender. Li Ang was victorious as always, looking at Hancock beside him with a smile, his arms around Hancock's slender waist, smelling the fragrance, his eyes narrowed slightly. Knew it. It was the feeling of being home that made him the most comfortable. Inside the marshal's office. Warring States frowned, and said, "How are the injuries of Akainu and Aokiji?" Standing opposite him, a soldier quickly replied, "Not very optimistic. General Aokiji burned his entire leg, which will leave great sequelae. And General Akainu's waist was directly penetrated by the ice. Even the internal organs have wounds. So, if you want to bet on 2 people to recover, at least 2 weeks are inevitable. And if you really want to heal the injury, it will take at least half a year." Half a year. Sengoku's face was calm, and he muttered to himself in a low voice. That is to say, he still has to stay in the position of marshal for so long. However, he was troubled when he thought of the vacant position of the general that appeared after Akainu became the marshal. Peach Rabbit, T. Dolphin. These 2 people are still some distance from the general. At present, the naval headquarters is in need of powerful generals to stabilize the situation. But within the Navy, there are no such tyrannical people anymore. Could it be that we can only recruit talents from outside? Warring States exhaled heavily and rubbed his temples. There are no strong people in the Navy headquarters. If you want to supplement the personnel of the generals, then you must recruit troops from outside, which is a must. The 2 generals, Tautu and T. Dolphin, are still some distance away from the generals. The 2 want to become generals, at least not now. Chapter 824-Foreign Recruits. NLT, 39 and GT. The 2 want to become generals, at least not now. Therefore, the only way is to recruit generals from outside. According to my order, we will carry out the recruitment of soldiers in the world. Select the best personnel and let him be promoted to the general candidate of the Navy headquarters. Warring States exhaled heavily, looked at the soldier, and commanded. This, Marshal of the Warring States period, do you really want to do this? If you are recruiting foreign troops, it is possible that the people you recruit will not know how good they are. We don't know the bottom line at all. The soldier hesitated and said, "I'm very clear about your worries. You just need to do as I say. As for the next thing, I'll take over." Sengoku said with an expressionless face. "Yes." The soldier did not dare to refute, and immediately left the office. The rest of the Warring States was in the office, his face was heavy, and his heart was under great pressure. Recruiting troops from outside, as a marshal of the Navy headquarters, such a thing has rarely happened in the past. But now, it is really helpless. Inside the Navy headquarters, there is no connection between green and yellow, and there is no one who is qualified for the position of the Admiral of the Navy headquarters. Apart from recruiting people from outside, there is no other way. The three generals are the living signs of the Navy headquarters. The vacancy of any one person will have a huge impact on the Navy headquarters. Therefore, Sengoku did not want to see this situation arise. Must recruit generals from outside. Only in this way can the vacancy in the Navy headquarters be maintained. He retired, Akainu has changed from general to marshal, 3 generals have become 2, and 1 more person has to be recruited to maintain the current situation. As for how long it will take, that's unknown. Warring States sighed, standing by the window, said. He knew that the injuries of the 2 would be serious, but he didn't expect that the 2 of them had not woken up until now. You know, the strength of the 2 is not just talk. Is it because it is too strong that it hurts more when it collides? Aokiji, this kid surprised me. Actually, the fruit has awakened. Sengoku narrowed his eyes slightly, and said with a gratified smile on his face. However, Akainu also awakened to the same fruit, which still surprised the Warring States period. When the 2 of them awakened and fought, they would naturally be very violent. No wonder, Aokiji will lose. Losing is also very exciting. After 10 days and 10 nights, because of one move, he lost to Akainu. With such a record, 540 can't say Aokiji is weak. On the contrary, such a record just happened to show that both of them are very strong. Warring States whispered to himself, holding the newspaper in both hands. The news in the newspaper was naturally conveyed according to his orders. The above briefly explained the process of replacing the position of marshal. As for the response, he has learned about the turmoil on the sea from the news that has been circulated from the sea. Unsurprisingly, the sea was boiling. Because of the replacement of the marshal, it even led to a more chaotic situation in the sea. Some pirates are as fierce as ever, slaughtering the island. And some pirates are a little more stable for a while, and everyone can feel that Akainu has just taken office, and it is bound to carry out a cleanup on the pirates. A smart pirate, choose to be safe for a while, and not go out to provoke things arrogantly. And some of them are still doing the same things as before, burning, killing, looting, doing all kinds of evil, and they still haven't stopped. But there will definitely be repercussions. There are many people who are against the Navy headquarters and strongly against the extreme thinking of Akainu to become a marshal. Of course, things have 2 sides. Some people oppose it, some support it. These things, the Warring States period is not very concerned about, just need to pay attention to casually. At present, the most important thing for him is to decide on recruiting troops from outside. Chapter 825 _ The Green Pheasant is gone. The news on the sea is really confusing. Sengoku sighed, put down the newspaper, and his eyes fell into deep thought. This sea is really making people more and more invisible. In the chaotic waters, there are countless pirates, and the Navy must naturally resist pirates tenaciously and maintain the stability of the sea. But the Warring States period did not know that the greatest purpose of the existence of the Navy is not to maintain the peace of the sea. Rather, as the lackey of the Tianlong people. The Navy does not exist for the people. Even if he was reluctant to do such a thing, he could not easily reverse the existence value of the Navy headquarters. Sometimes, it's not that he can change as a marshal. The existence value of the Navy has been identified from the very beginning. And he is just one of the managers, not the highest authority. What he said was useful to the people below, and to the people above, it was just flies screaming, and it would not be taken seriously at all. Perhaps, Akainu can change. However, he also has to take certain risks. Hopefully, everything goes well for him. Sengoku looked at the blue sky outside the window and whispered to himself. ... The next day. Sunny. The sea breeze was blowing, and the entire Marin Fando exuded a cold feeling. Naval Headquarters, Medical Room. As the medical room of the Navy headquarters, the environment here is quite spacious. There are also many patients in it. Most of them are casualties caused by accidental injuries and accidents caused by exercise on weekdays. Of course. There are also a small number of people who participated in the Battle of Whitebeard, and their injuries have not recovered. But most of them were only slightly injured and chatted with each other here. Because of the turmoil in the past few days, when everyone is chatting, it is inevitable that they will touch on a recent big news. Naturally, it is the matter of running for marshal. Admiral Akainu, you've become a marshal. That's true, it's not surprising at all. In the competition between the two generals, it can't be an accident that any one of them stands out. No, but I think General Aokiji, as a marshal, is a better choice. It's a pity that Admiral Aokiji lost this battle. Shut up. Don't openly say these words here. If you let others hear you, you will be in big trouble. You can't talk nonsense. As a Navy, this is even more so. Everyone, please pay attention. Quote. There was a lot of talk, and every Navy was talking. There is news about what happened recently, namely the campaign for marshal. Basically everyone has a different opinion, but they don't dare to speak. After all. Next to them, General Aokiji is still lying there. Beside us, General Aokiji is still healing. It is said that General Aokiji has not fully recovered yet. Don't talk about recovery. I heard from the nurse that Admiral Aokiji couldn't even open his eyes. Really? Don't lie to me, a man like General Chingzi. It's been more than a day, can't you even open your eyes? Quote. There were bursts of discussion and noise. Next to the location. Here, there is a separate medical room. On the hospital bed, Aokiji was lying peacefully with his eyes closed, without any signs of moving. Several nurses talked to each other. Chapter 825 _ The Green Pheasant is gone. Several nurses talked to each other. Admiral Aokiji hasn't woken up yet. I heard that Admiral Akainu has woken up. Why is Admiral Aokiji, but he hasn't responded yet? Maybe, General Aokiji's injury is more serious. Yes, at the beginning, the doctor rescued for a few hours before the Aokiji general was out of danger. Quote. A guard looked at the green pheasant, hesitated for a moment, and said, "Let's go out, don't disturb the rest of the general of the green pheasant." After speaking, several guards gradually left here. Empty medical room. Only the green pheasant, and many unexpected machines, are emitting bursts of sounds. Drop, drop, drop. In his body, there are countless pinholes pierced, and the water enters his body, restoring the activity of his body and the injured part. Suddenly, Aokiji, who had been motionless before, opened his eyes. He looked around in confusion, his head seemed to be about to burst, staring at the surrounding scenes, silent, not speaking. After a long time, he spoke slowly, his voice hoarse, "I, lost." He looked at the position he was in, and his heart suddenly understood. Himself, seems to be in the medical room, not in Punk Hasad. That means that you have been defeated. Thinking of this, his face became heavy, and he sighed helplessly. This result made it difficult for him to accept, but the fact was a fact, and he was unable to change it. The position of the marshal, it seems, belongs to this guy Sakazuki. And I am not eligible for the position of the marshal. If he becomes the marshal, will the Navy headquarters really be able to prosper? The corners of Aokiji's mouth moved slightly, and he muttered to himself in a low voice. Even he himself is not sure about this. There were bursts of sounds from the surrounding machines, making him recover. Looking around, there were a lot of pinholes in his arms, and medical fluids were injected. Sakazuki as a marshal, I think, has no place for me. My philosophy is always different from his. He can't tolerate my presence either. If it weren't for the existence of Mr. Liang at that time, I'm afraid he would have killed me. Aokiji is sorting out some things. After a long time, his eyes flashed brightly, he directly pulled out the pinhole on his body, twisted his arm a little, and found that his physical strength had recovered a lot. Although there is still a serious injury, it has not affected his own movement. Immediately, his eyes flashed a little, looking at the scene outside the window. After half an hour, a guard was holding a white notebook and a black pen in his hands, and was walking towards Aokiji's dead personal medical room step by step, after she opened the door. What I saw was a scene that made her whole body stiff. The medical liquid was still flowing, but it fell to the ground and accumulated a layer of water. And the medical machine is also emitting sound, but it is completely different from the previous one. On the hospital bed, the figure of the green pheasant disappeared without a trace. General Ching Pheasant. The guard's lips trembled, he couldn't help but ask tentatively. She also held a fluke mentality, thinking that Aokiji went to the toilet. However, when she thought that whoever went to the toilet would pull out the pinhole in her hand, she had to panic. Her throat was dry, she swallowed, and stared blankly at the vacant seat on the hospital bed in front of her. There are still traces of some people's existence. In the face of this kind of thing, she could no longer hide her panic, and screamed loudly, "Someone! General Ching and Chingzi are gone. NLT, 42 and GT. Chapter 826-defection. In a blink of an eye. The entire medical room was filled with people, and it was completely surrounded by water. Everyone's expressions were full of shock, looking at the empty infirmary in front of them, their lips trembling. In particular, the guards here walked to the window in disbelief and checked it carefully. The window is open. A guard thought for a moment and said, "General Chingzi, did he leave by himself? Or did someone else take him away?" The beautiful nurse hesitated and asked, "If it is the latter, does that prove that someone wants to be detrimental to Admiral Aokiji? Now that General Chingzi is injured, I am afraid that if the enemy takes advantage of it to enter, it is really too dangerous." The rest of the people started talking. Is Admiral Aokiji awake? I don't know, but General Aokiji may have left by himself. Look, the footprints in the ground are only those of General Aokiji alone. Yeah, why didn't I think of it? But if Admiral Aokiji wakes up, why would he choose to leave the ward? Besides, he still leaves from the window. Why does it feel like he is stealing chickens and dogs? No, if General Chingzi wants to go out for a walk, there is no need to go through the window. Or, he doesn't want to be noticed by others. But why doesn't he want to be noticed by others? 060. Quote. Numerous speculations followed. The nurses looked ugly, and they realized that things were a little troublesome. Under his feet, there is indeed only the footprints of Aokiji alone. The biggest possibility is that Aokiji woke up and left here voluntarily. But Aokiji woke up, why did he take the initiative to leave? And, still quietly, leaving the window without causing anyone to notice. What to do? A nurse asked. Report to the Warring States Marshal. Apart from this, there is no other way. I hope that General Aokiji is just going out to relax, not as I imagined. A guard sighed and said helplessly. Even if the green pheasant is injured, I am afraid that these people can't stop it. Let's go and report to the Warring States Marshal. The matter is beyond our control. The consequences can be big or small and cannot be ignored. A guard quickly left the scene. The rest of the staff, also driven by the nurses, gradually left. However, the news that Aokiji left the ward was revealed, covering the entire Marin Fando. AIBG. What? Admiral Aokiji disappeared. Under what circumstances? A Navy soldier's eyes widened, his expression full of puzzlement. The rest of the staff replied, it is said that after General Aokiji woke up, he left from the window. During this process, no one was disturbed. It didn't disappear, but he left from the window himself. He even pulled out the medical equipment on his body. Quote. Okay, why do you have to leave the window? Can't you leave from the front door? Besides, why did you leave the ward after being seriously injured? It's strange. Yes, everyone thought it was strange. But at that time, there was only one obvious footprint on the floor. It is inferred from this that General Aokiji left by himself. Quote. The crowd started a conversation. Navy headquarters, in the marshal's office. Dong dong dong. There was a knock on the door. Sengoku looked at the Navy soldiers in front of him and asked, "What's the matter?" Soldier looked anxious. Marshal of the Warring States period, General Chingzi is awake. Awake. How's the situation? Warring States' eyes flashed, showing a bit of comfort, said. Chapter 826-defection. NGT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. NLT, 43 NGT. Warring States' eyes flashed, showing a bit of comfort, said. No, the situation is very wrong. After Admiral Aokiji woke up, he pulled out the medical equipment on his body. The whole person has disappeared in the ward. We deduced from the environment at the time that Admiral Aokiji left by himself. He left the window without disturbing anyone. The window was open, and the nurses found out after a while. However, it was impossible to trace. The soldier's face was a little heavy, and he told the truth. Well. Warring States' face became particularly solemn, and he did not speak. The atmosphere is very depressing. The soldier's breath seemed to be very uncomfortable. At this moment, Warring States suddenly opened his mouth and said, "Take me to see it." Yes, Marshal. The soldier breathed a sigh of relief and said quickly. He led the Warring States and quickly left the Marshal's office. Along the way, Warring States' faces are very ugly. He always has an ominous premonition in his heart. Just hope that things are not as bad as he imagined. If the guess is confirmed, the situation in the Navy headquarters will only be more troublesome. Aokiji, what are you thinking? Warring States was so anxious that he couldn't make a deal, and he cursed in his heart. At this juncture, Chingzi, this guy, is still playing these games, which is really worrying. Soon, he arrived at the scene, and after seeing the scene, his guess was gradually verified. His face was gloomy, and he stared at the empty hospital bed. The people around were all suppressed by his gloomy aura, and looked at the ugly face of Warring States with horror on their faces. They rarely saw such an expression on the face of the Warring States Marshal, but at this moment, they saw it. This gave each of them an ominous feeling in their mood. It's all gone, I'll take over this matter. The rest of the staff, do whatever they need to do, don't delay their own affairs, understand? Warring States glanced at the crowd and commanded. Yes, Marshal. Everyone nodded immediately, not daring to disobey the orders of the Warring States. After speaking, the Warring States left immediately, coming and going in a hurry, without stopping. The rest of the staff were chatting in low voices, looking at the back of the Warring States period. They always felt that things were not as simple as they thought. Just want to go out and relax. This explanation is inexplicable. If this is the case, there is no need to unplug the medical device at all, and there is no need to step away from the window position. It's absolutely possible, open and above board, and go out from the front door under the care of the nurse. But now, not only one person left, but also from the window. This makes people feel a little sneaky. General Chingzi, what did you think? Where did he go? Leaving from the window. Besides, I left alone without notifying the nurse. I don't know why, but I feel that this matter will be very complicated. Could it be, General Chingzi, he wants to? A guard's pupils shrank, holding back some words. He wanted to say, General Chingzi, did you defect? But the relationship of this sentence is too great, he dare not say it casually. If it's true, it's nothing. But if Aokiji returns here next, then his remarks will disturb the military's heart. Such punishment is not something he can bear. Chapter 827-Chaos Marin Vando. Let's go. This matter, since the Warring States Marshal intervenes, it will have nothing to do with us. Even if we want to intervene, we don't have the qualifications. One of the guards understood the situation very well and said immediately. Their identities are too far from Aokiji. They, who are not even lieutenant generals, want to intervene in such a thing. It is a joke. Let's go, let's go. The rest of the guards also dispersed. There are still some nurses left, who still put away the machines and other things, and then leave gradually after they are cleaned up. This incident made each of them feel heavy. They are all grown-ups, and no one is stupid. When this happened, everyone naturally had some guesses in their heads. Only, tacitly did not speak. Once he opens his mouth, some of the guesses he said will make Marin Fanduo boil and panic. Such charges are very serious. Since the Warring States Marshal has said it, they can only keep all their thoughts in their hearts and wait for the day when the result will appear. Hope, it's not as bad as they imagined. The other side. After returning to the Marshal's office, Warring States immediately dialed the phone bug and communicated with Lieutenant General Crane. A few minutes later, Warring States lay on the chair, hung up the phone bug, and rubbed his temples. It's serious. He told Lieutenant General Crane what was in his heart, and he expressed his intentions. If he wanted to block Marin Fando, he must not let anyone go. But this idea was rejected by Lieutenant General Crane. Yan said, if the green pheasant wants to leave, who can stop it? Now that it is stopped, what will happen in the future? Is it possible that as a general, there must be someone to guard at all times? Who can guard one? A general with terrifying strength. Thought here. Sengoku was also silent, speechless. What he thought was that Aokiji might really want to leave Marin Fando. In a hurry, I immediately used these methods to prevent Aokiji from leaving. But he ignored that Qingzi is not a child, nor is he a helpless person. If you can stop it today, what about tomorrow? If I can stop it tomorrow, one day, Aokiji's injury will recover. In this way, a general will leave, who can keep it? Even if you keep it, will you keep the other party's heart? Aokiji, don't make any mistakes. Diaresis. Warring States took a deep breath and muttered to himself. He hoped that things didn't turn out to be as troublesome as he imagined. But judging from the current situation, things seem to be going in the direction he least wants to. Now, he has to find Aokiji and have a good talk with him. Present. He called the phone bug again and instructed the staff to look for the trace of the green pheasant within the range of Marin Fando. Absolutely, no corner can be missed. Hang up the phone bug again. Warring States raised his head, looked at the ceiling, and sighed for a long time. Aokiji, but he is the most optimistic person. Like Garp and Crane, they are most optimistic about Aokiji, and they are also the biggest backers who support Aokiji to become a marshal. But now, some of the things that Aokiji have done have disappointed them too much. Let's go, you guys go there to search, I'll go here. Remember, don't act rashly, he is General Qingzi, not a prisoner. Also, although General Qingzi was injured, his strength should not be underestimated. If you act rashly, the people who will be beaten in the end are only you. Chapter 827 _ The Chaotic Marin Fando. Also, although General Qingzi was injured, his strength should not be underestimated. If you act rashly, the people who will be beaten in the end are only you. So, you have to be careful. Once you encounter General Aokiji, you will immediately send a signal. Did you hear it clearly? A lieutenant general shouted with a solemn face. Listen clearly. Okay, let's go. A group of people quickly launched a search for Marin Fando. They have not let go of all the areas in Marin Vatican. Under the orders of the Warring States period, many naval soldiers have already joined the operation. Most, in groups, because the person they are going to face is General Aokiji. The strength of General Qingzi is terrifying, far beyond what they can face. Only in groups, it is possible to see each other without being instantly killed by the other party, and even the signal cannot be transmitted. Of course, they're just scheming for the best and the worst. What if the other party just went out to relax when he met General Qingzi? Any possibility, there is a certain probability. Afterwards, the entire Marin Vatican was boiling. At the beginning, because of Akainu's becoming a marshal, it has already made the place boil once. But now, the disappearance of the green pheasant has once again raised the news to a higher level. What? Admiral Aokiji disappeared. My God, what's going on? Isn't he lying on the hospital bed? Why did he suddenly disappear? It is said that General Qingzi left by himself. Moreover, the Warring States Marshal has also issued an order, be sure to find General Qingzi in Marinfando. This battle, I feel, is like tracking down the prisoner. Don't talk nonsense, these things must not be spread out, otherwise, we will be in trouble. Quote. Groups of people have joined the search ranks. The task of looking for the green pheasant covers the entire Marinfando. In addition to boiling, what Marinfando felt was an ominous premonition. Everyone felt that what happened next, I'm afraid, would shock them. The affairs of General Qingzi revealed a sense of mystery everywhere. Check. A group of navy walked to the streets and alleys, but still did not find any shadow. At the same time, in a separate hospital room, Akainu's face was expressionless. After listening to the nurse's introduction, his eyes flashed a little, and he said, "So, Aokiji left the ward alone?" "Yes, Marshal Sakaski." The nurse nodded quickly and told the truth. Now, Akainu has officially become a marshal. Good Jiao. At present, it is only because of the injury that he cannot take over the work of the Warring States period. However, the identity of the marshal is well deserved, and there is no need for any doubts. Therefore, when nurses address Akainu, they naturally need to use honorifics. I see, you go out. Akainu waved his hand and said slowly. Yes, Marshal. The nurse left quickly. After leaving, she patted her chest. Just now, she was a little out of breath because of Akainu's aura. Inside the ward, the corner of Akainu's mouth evoked an intriguing arc, and said to himself, Aokiji, you seem to have taken a risky move. I hope you can go well. If you go well, I will also go well, so, to each other all good. Finished talking. He felt the pain in his waist, took a deep breath, and his face became gloomy. The injury here, of course, was brought to him by Aokiji. Chapter 828-Aokiji came. After half an hour. Inside the marshal's office. A soldier stood in front of the Warring States, a little timid, and told the truth. Marshal of the Warring States, we have searched most of the Marinfando area. Still, there is no trace of the appearance of General Qingzi. Keep looking, be sure to find him. Sengoku said with a heavy face. Yes, Marshal. The soldier left again. In the office, there was only one person left in the Warring States period, and his face became more and more ugly. Things were going in an unexpected direction. In this way, I am afraid that the guess will soon be realized. If the guesses come true, that thing. He couldn't imagine the scene at that time. Aokiji, don't be impulsive. Warring States took a deep breath, opened the door voluntarily, put on his clothes, and left the office. Marshal of the Warring States, may I ask you this? A soldier asked with a puzzled face. I'm going to find Aokiji myself. Sengoku's face was calm and he said slowly. After he finished speaking, he ignored the soldier's gaze and left. The soldier looked at the back of the Warring States period, his face full of surprise. The Warring States Marshal has been dispatched. This is the sky going to change? The departure of General Qingzi has made the Warring States Marshal pay so much attention. It seems that things are not as simple as 000. Ah. ... The entire Marin Vatican was in a commotion. Numerous forces have joined the search for Aokiji. It's a pity that the green pheasant hides too deeply, making it impossible for these people to find it. Even the back of the green pheasant was not seen at all. There are many soldiers, originating from the position where the green pheasant left the window, trying to find some clues. But unfortunately, except for some ice cubes on the ground, there is nothing else. But there is one thing for sure. That is, Aokiji left on his own. Instead, anyone carried him away. Basically, this thing has been guessed by many people. However, there is no solid evidence to prove it. Now, seeing those ice cubes on the ground, this guess can be directly confirmed. Many people's hearts set off waves, and they felt strange waves. Malin Fando, what happened is so weird. Let them feel, it seems to be the prelude to the storm. Marin Vando, in a certain room. Liang was lying on the sofa with a calm face, looking at the somewhat sick middle-aged man in front of him, without speaking. The middle-aged man on the opposite side didn't speak either. He had curly hair, and he was wearing a sick suit, his face was pale, and he exuded an icy chill. That's right. This person is Aokiji. In the entire Marin Vando, every navy tried their best to find the trace of the green pheasant. But no one expected that he would appear at Liang's residence. Liang was also a little surprised. When the green pheasant came knocking on the door at first, he was surprised to say that the green pheasant recovered quickly. But then, the things that Malin Fando became chaotic, gradually let him understand Qingzi's own plan. Mr. Liang. Aokiji's lips moved slightly dry, and said in a low voice. He is still seriously injured, and a lieutenant general can defeat him. So, now he has experienced the weakest state in history. Let's talk about it. I'm always, not the Navy. Chapter 828 _ The Green Pheasant Came. Let's talk about it. I'm always, not the Navy. Liang smiled, his eyes narrowed slightly, looking at the green pheasant in front of him, said. His remarks also relieved Qingzi a little, and he was not as nervous as before. I want you to take me out of Marin Vando. Aokiji took a deep breath and said solemnly. Reason. Liang didn't ask too much, he said simply and clearly. You can see it, Marin Vando now. There are people everywhere, trying to catch me, although it's not so exaggerated. But it looks like a prisoner. Aokiji laughed at himself, and he could also feel the chaos of Malin Fando outside. Came to Liang after avoiding several waves of people AIFB looking for him. It was almost discovered, and at such a risk, he arrived at Liang's residence. If you didn't come out of the window, I don't think there would be a battle like this. Liang said thoughtfully and bluntly. If I go out from the main entrance, then I will be discovered directly. Moreover, there will be a group of follower bugs. At that time, if I want to leave, it will be even more difficult. At the end of the day, the injuries on my body are still too serious. So, a lieutenant general can trap me, there is no doubt about that. Aokiji sighed and said slowly. What do you mean? You want to defect? Liang didn't care about this and asked directly. Defection is also reasonable for him. He also knew for a long time that after this battle, the Aokiji society voluntarily resigned from the position of general. But at the moment, Aokiji does not want to resign the position of the general, but wants to escape directly from Marin Fando. Did not resign the general, but no longer as a general. This was somewhat different from what Liang had in mind. But overall, there is not much difference. Defection. This word is quite appropriate. Aokiji smiled, and seemed to be very downhearted. If you lose, you will lose, and the position of marshal is not for him. However, he also didn't want to work under Akainu's hands, not because he couldn't afford to lose, but because Akainu's philosophy was always different from his. He is better, not seeing is pure. So, what price can you give if you want me to help you? The corner of Liang's mouth raised an arc, and he smiled faintly. He and Aokiji do know each other, but not to the point of helping each other. If there is no price to impress him, then he will not shoot, which is inevitable. The price. Aokiji fell into deep thought and did not speak. After a long time, he raised his head, looked at Li Ang in front of him, and said solemnly, "I will exchange a message with you. How can I be sure that this piece of information is of such high value?" Li Ang smiled even more, and he knew far more information than Qingzi. In this way, the information that Aokiji said was actually of little use to him. Unless, it's information that even he doesn't know, and also, information that Aokiji never revealed. You can judge for yourself and think the value of this information. How much you judge the value of, I agree with it. Aokiji thought for a while and said seriously. "You really believe me?" Li Ang said with a smile. What Aokiji said meant to say. The value of information, let him give a price. Therefore, no matter how much he gave, Aokiji would not refute it. In the same way, these remarks can also prove that Qingzi still trusts Li Ang's prestige. Chapter 829-Mysterious Seabed. Mr. Li Ang can ensure the fairness and justice of that battle. What else can I not trust? At that time, the benefits given by Akainu and the others must have been quite high. However, Mr. Li Ang, you still did not accept it in the end. It can be seen that Mr. Li Ang, your character is as amazing as your strength. Aokiji's face was pale, and he reluctantly showed a smile, saying, "The general is flattering me, it's quite comfortable." Li Ang didn't care, said with a smile. Aokiji smiled and did not speak, waiting for the reply from the power. "Then, tell me your information, I'll judge and I won't deceive you. After all, sending you away from Marin Fando is just a trivial matter for me." Li Ang's face was calm and he said confidently. For him, sending Aokiji away from Marin Fando was indeed only a very common thing. Moreover, it can also be done unconsciously. Perhaps this is why Aokiji came to him. Good. Aokiji didn't hesitate, his face became solemn, and said, "A few years ago, I went from Chambord Archipelago to enter Fishman Island. When I dived into the seabed, I encountered some strange things. To this day, I still remember it fresh. Quote, it makes you feel weird. You are a general." Li Ang was also deeply surprised and said slowly. As a general, Aokiji felt strange things. Then it can be judged that this matter is really not easy. At the time, I didn't feel much, but when I looked back, I realized that the more I thought about it, the more wrong it was. After thinking about it, I learned that what happened at that time was really scary. Unfortunately, when I entered there again later, the same incident never happened. So, I think that incident was a coincidence. Aokiji continued, "At that time, I dived to about the bottom of the sea. Yes, I could even see some soil on the bottom of the sea. Very soft soil. At that time, the warship was coated with film and did not dare to land on the ground, for fear of breaking the film. Under the sea, if the coating is broken, everyone in the ship has to withstand the erosion of water pressure for a moment. On the spot, the head lost control and could not be judged, and then the whole person would die directly. Many people who went to Fishman Island were buried in the sea after the coating was broken." Go on. A funny smile appeared on Li Ang's face and said. After Aokiji nodded, he continued, "I met a lot of ghost ships on the bottom of the sea. These ghost ships also became unowned because of the death of the people in the ship, and I don't know how long they stayed on the bottom of the sea. All in all, I found a terrible thing. Right at the bottom of the sea, I didn't care much at the time. After I left, I found a terrible thing. In retrospect, there were 8 ghost ships that I saw at the time. But when I was about to leave, there were still 6 ships left. These things were all I recalled after I left there. But it's not the main reason for the horror. It's just a beginning. I thought about it carefully. Why did 2 ships disappear? Moreover, it disappeared under my nose. Later, I studied it and found it. Under the sea, there is space. Finished talking. Qingzi's face became more and more solemn, looking at Li Ang in front of him. At this time, Li Ang was also a little surprised, and asked with a smile, "Do you think there is space under the sea, and then the boat is taken away? Is that what you mean?" "That's right." Aokiji nodded, his eyes fell into deep thought. "There is evidence for this question. Because at the bottom of the sea, I not only saw the disappearance of the ship, I also saw the soft ground with some very mysterious lines. I deduce that it is possible that intelligent life once existed at the bottom of the sea. They have always existed in our world. However, we have never noticed it." Chapter 829-Mysterious Seabed. I deduce that it is possible that intelligent life once existed at the bottom of the sea. They have always existed in our world. However, we have never noticed it. These beings are definitely not sea kings. Aokiji said it very sincerely and seriously, and he couldn't see the expression on his lying face at all. And Li Ang also used a little bit of domineering arrogance to figure out what the other party was thinking. Likewise, there was no element of the other party lying. In other words, everything Aochi said was the truest words from his heart, without any false elements at all. Of course. It's just his own understanding, it's just that he didn't lie. But that doesn't mean that what he said is necessarily true. He didn't lie, just on behalf of his own deep trust, and his own guesses were true. But exactly how, no one knows. Only by going there once in person can we judge whether what Aokiji said is true. Under the sea, is there intelligent life? 0. Li Ang's eyes twinkled and asked. Yes, that's my guess. Of course, I don't think I can trust you with what I've said. But I've got some things from there that I think should be of interest to you. Aokiji took a deep breath and threw a heavy bomb. What? Li Ang asked excitedly. I carry this thing with me all the time, and I never lost it even in the battle with Sakazuki. Because I want to find its secrets. But after searching for so many years, I found nothing. I couldn't even find the scene at that time. So, I had to give up this naive and dreamy thing. However, if it is Mr. Li Ang, you will definitely be able to find some clues. When the time comes, please tell me the answer, and I will be satisfied. Finished talking. Aokiji took out a pendant from his neck. Li Ang hadn't found out before that the green pheasant originally had a pendant. Come to think of it, this should be some items he found from the bottom of the sea. He put the east and west on the table and said, Mr. Li Ang, this is what I found from the bottom of the sea. I'll take a look. Li Ang looked at the items on the table, picked them up and observed them. This is an item similar to a lock. It is jet black, the size is only the size of a thumb, and there is no sign of rust. The material must be good. At the same time, some patterns are also painted on the surface, which is very mysterious and mysterious. At that time, I also got it by accident. After all, such a small thing has a very weak sense of existence on the bottom of the sea. However, it was glowing at that time. Yes, this thing, it glows in the dark. That's why I was able to find it for the first time. But since then, it has never glowed again. I'm sure I was not hallucinating at the time. Aokiji said very solemnly. I can feel that its origin is somewhat extraordinary. Although I can't be sure of the things you said, its material is enough to prove that it is of great value. Just for what it's worth, I think I'll be able to take you out of Marin Vatican. As for what you said, I wouldn't mind exploring it if I had the chance. Li Ang said with a smile, holding what resembled a lock in his hand. Chapter 830-Sending Away the Green Pheasant. Mr. Li Ang, when will you leave? Aokiji took a deep breath and asked. He couldn't wait for a moment, and wanted to leave Marin Fando urgently. With his current strength, it would take a lot of time to be open and upright. Moreover, it may not be possible to leave openly. Therefore, he had to ask Li Ang to take him away. Perhaps this will cause some unrest in the Navy, as well as some unnecessary trouble. But as long as he escaped the storm during this period, after the injury recovered, he would naturally not be afraid of any trouble. When do you want to? I'm free anytime. Li Ang put away the lock-shaped object given by Qingzi and asked with a smile. Now that I have received the things from Qingzi, naturally, it is understandable to do things for the other party. The sooner the better, but I still have one more thing to do. I need to say hello to others before leaving Marin Vando. Probably, I will leave in half an hour. Aokiji thought for a while and said slowly. Good. Li Ang didn't ask too much about the green pheasant's movements, and simply agreed. It's not a problem to send Aokiji away. Then I'll leave first, and I'll come back to you in half an hour. Aokiji stood up, dragged his heavy body, and left the room step by step. Li Ang looked at Qingzi's back. His face was calm, lying on the sofa, there was no sign of moving. 817 waited until Aokiji left before he looked back. It can be said that he had already anticipated the fact that Aokiji was going to leave Marin Vando. In the room, Hancock walked out one step at a time, looked at Li Ang, and said with a smile, the whole Marin Vanduo is looking for him everywhere. I didn't expect that he actually came to ask you. I accidentally harvested a magical thing. The bottom of the sea does not seem to be as safe as I imagined. Li Ang said slowly with a smile on his face. He held the lock on the palm of his hand with both hands, his eyes narrowed slightly, and he observed it carefully. However, I still haven't been able to study why. It can only be said that according to the saying of the green pheasant, the bottom of the sea is really mysterious. If there is a chance, I will take you to see it. Li Ang looked at Hancock's delicate face and smiled. Yeah. Hancock nodded slightly and smiled. The other side. After Aokiji left Li Ang's room, he quickly found Carp. This is the veteran he respects the most. Before leaving, the only person he looked for was Garp. In addition, the entire naval headquarters was completely boiling. It's been an hour. No one has found any trace of the green pheasant, which makes many navies smell an unusual breath. It seems like a storm is coming. As the Marshal of the Warring States period, he was also frowning and didn't know what to do. Aokiji, is this your decision? Warring States exhaled heavily, his face was ugly, and he sighed. Qingzi obviously didn't want people to find out, so after searching for so long, no one came back with any news, and his mood became more and more sad. Even he himself joined the search for Aokiji. Unfortunately. Likewise, he got nothing. After thinking about it, he dialed Carp's phone number and asked, Cap, have you found Aokiji? Garp on the opposite side was silent and did not speak. What's wrong? Sengoku's expression changed slightly, his brows furrowed, and he asked. As an old comrade in arms for many years, he can perceive that Garp's mood is definitely different. Otherwise, there will be no silence. Chapter 830 Send Away the Green Pheasant. As an old comrade in arms for many years, he can perceive that Garp's mood is definitely different. Otherwise, there will be no silence. He came to see me just now. Carp rubbed his temples, looked up at the sky, and said. What? Warring States was shocked and hurriedly said, Hurry up and stop him, wait for me, I will persuade him. You must, don't let him go, or you will never be able to find him again. It's too late, he's gone. I didn't stop him, he told me his plans. I think he should have his own opinion. So, I didn't stop him. Carp's tone was inexplicable, mixed with very complicated and unspeakable emotions. Confused. Warring States was annoyed and sighed helplessly. This time, Aokiji is really about to miss out with the Navy. He actually went to Carp, obviously, to prepare for leaving the Navy headquarters. Why is this? If you come to me, I will let you go as it should. But why not make a sound? Like a thief. Sengoku whispered to himself, he really couldn't understand Aokiji's mood. After half an hour, Qingzi stood in front of Li Ang's door. His face was pale, and he had changed into casual clothes. As always, he was wearing a green coat to cover the wounds in his body. He looked weak and seemed to fall down at any time. Ready. Li Ang stood at the door, looked at the green pheasant in front of him, and asked. Yes. Aokiji nodded solemnly and said. Then I'll send you out of the navy now. Li Ang looked back at Hancock and chuckled softly, wait for me for a few minutes. Yeah. Hancock nodded lightly without saying much. Immediately. Li Ang grabbed Qingzi's shoulders, kicked his feet, and the ground cracked a clear mark, and the two of them disappeared on the ground of Marin Fando in an instant. Li Ang's speed is very terrifying. Basically, except for Kizaru who can barely keep up, the others can't even notice the gap. Therefore, no one found out that Aokiji had left Marin Fando in silence. But there are still many people who continue to search the green pheasants in Marin Fando. It's a pity that even if they searched Marin Fando upside down, they couldn't find any trace of the green pheasant. Because, at this moment, the green pheasant has completely left Marin Fando. On the island closest to Marin Fando. On the sky. Li Ang carried the green pheasant and landed directly on the ground. There are no people around, this is a less prosperous island. Therefore, the position of the shore can only vaguely see some boats, but cannot see the situation of pedestrians. I'll take you here. Li Ang released his hands and said casually. Thank you. Aokiji bowed, nodded and said, it's pretty good to be able to get here. Next, I'll do the rest of the road myself. I hope you don't go the wrong way. Li Ang smiled and prepared to leave. Suddenly, he stopped, turned his head, looked at Aokiji, and said, the dark world of the New World is not something you can imagine. If you touch it, you will be in great trouble. Having said that, I will no more reminders. I see. Aokiji was heartbroken and nodded. Haha, with your strength, you don't need to worry about too many dangers. Li Ang waved his hand, moved his footsteps, and gradually left Qingzi's sight. I should go too. Aokiji retracted his gaze, took a deep breath, and walked step by step towards the depths of the forest. Chapter 821-Fujitora, Green Bull. It took a few minutes for Li Ang to return to Marin Fando again. It only took a few minutes before and after, and no one could find out. After returning to the room, Li Ang saw Hancock. Hancock asked, send him away. Yes. Li Ang walked to the edge of the sofa, gradually lay down, and nodded. A general, just left. Hancock also expressed a little emotion and said softly. People, there are always different ways to go. I can understand his approach. Of course, his departure may be a big plan. Li Ang smiled and said meaningfully. Before long, Aokiji will cooperate with Blackbeard. Who can make it clear that there is no cooperation here? Is it just pure cooperation? This is naturally unrealistic. After all, Aokiji is, after all, a general of the Navy headquarters. Although he has left, there will never be a lack of justice in his heart. Such a person, working with Blackbeard. It is tantamount to scheming with a tiger. But Aokiji is a fool. He naturally knew who he was going to work with, and he also knew exactly who Blackbeard was. But he still cooperated. It can be shown that he also has his own plan. In short, who can predict anything that happens? Everything just happened on the surface. No one dared to say whether Aokiji cooperated with Blackbeard, just acting as an undercover agent. This time, the Navy headquarters ushered in the greatest chaos in history. Hancock looked at the window, lying beside Li Ang, said. Li Ang put his arms around Hancock's slender waist and nodded. Yeah, Aokiji has left. Akainu, as a general, retired from the Warring States period. It's time to fill the positions of the two generals that were lacking. Today's Navy headquarters, I want to find out who is suitable for the general from the following people. It is too difficult, and Tautu can't become a general. Hancock thought for a moment and said. So, they have to make an exception this time. Exceptionally recruiting powerful combat powers who can become generals from outside can fill the positions of the two generals that are now vacant. Li Ang didn't hide it and introduced it with a smile. It's still a bit inappropriate in this case. However, it can also be proved that the current naval headquarters is facing a very weak predicament. If there is an enemy attacking at this time, then the naval headquarters is really hanging. Akainu is seriously injured, Aokiji fled, and the two generals have no additional manpower. Hancock's thoughts flew for a while. These things are not something we need to consider. After a while, I will bring Tautu and Tina with me to stay away from this disputed naval headquarters, which is not bad. Li Ang smiled and continued. Well, next stop, where are we going? Hancock raised his head, his big eyes were very smart, looking at Li Ang. Li Ang couldn't help but pecked on her delicate face, looked at the latter's pretty red face, and said with a smile, next stop, I'll go back to your home. Daughter Island. Hancock was a little surprised. A few days later. Office of the Marshal. Several days have passed since Aokiji escaped. Malin Fando was almost turned upside down, but it was still unavoidable that there was no trace of the green pheasant. In the past few days, most of Zangoku's hair has turned white, and his face is slightly old. Basically, it can be concluded that the green pheasant has left the matter of Marin Fando. In order to avoid causing a certain sensation, this matter was concealed by the Warring States period. Because the turmoil that the departure of a general will bring is really too great. It can only be said to the outside world that Qingzi voluntarily dismissed the position of the general. In addition, the new recruits for the two generals can suppress this news. Chapter 831-Fujitora, Green Bull. It can only be said to the outside world that Qingzi voluntarily dismissed the position of the general. In addition, the new recruits for the two generals can suppress this news. Sengoku's eyes flickered. He sat on the chair, thinking. This is the only way to suppress the news. Therefore, he naturally has to think carefully about how to notify people outside these days. Aokiji's departure has aroused many speculations. If you don't give a comprehensive explanation, I'm afraid, the people below will not be happy to accept it. Moreover, even if it is accepted, it will inevitably be discussed behind the scenes. This is a very bad situation for the Navy headquarters. Once the hearts of the people are scattered, the naval headquarters will also be reduced to a rotten force. If there is some big crisis, it will fall apart in an instant. At this time, it is necessary to recruit two generals to wash away the matter of Aokiji's departure. How is the progress of recruiting generals? Warring States frowned, thinking to himself. Just then, the door was knocked. A Navy soldier walked in with the documents in his hand, and said respectfully, Marshal of the Warring States period, many people have already recommended people to submit them. These people are very strong, and they are perfect for recruiting generals. 0. Put the information on the table. I'll look through it myself later to find two candidates who are suitable as generals. Sengoku pointed to the table and said slowly. Yes, Marshal. The soldier quickly put the information on the table. If you have nothing to do, you can leave here. In an hour, I will give you an answer, and then you take my answer and go to invite these two solemnly. Sengoku exhaled heavily and continued to speak. Soon. The soldier gradually left the office. In the huge office, there is only one person left in the Warring States period. He picked up the information handed over by the soldier, and quickly flipped through it, checking the various candidates on the information. 0. The average strength is very high, and they are all people who can be generals. Moreover, there is no criminal information in the records of various aspects. It can be seen that the character is still okay. The strength is already a general, and the character does not violate the rules and regulations of the Navy headquarters. As for the next thing, it needs to be verified. Let's observe it for a period of time, and then judge whether it is really suitable as a general. It's just that there are too many candidates. After all, who is better to choose? Warring States rubbed his temples, showing a very helpless look. The generals who recruited from abroad seem to have introduced too many people. Moreover, each strength is quite good. As a general, it is still qualified. There are 12 candidates in total. That is to say, he needs to select the 2 most suitable candidates for generals from these 12 people. Unfortunately, although these people's strength and character are worthy of guarantee, the Warring States period felt that they still lacked something. This thing is called trust. The 3 former admirals of the Navy all trusted each other very much. But this general, who is recruiting from his heart, can't guarantee that he will trust each other. However, by that time, the position of marshal was no longer his. Let this guy Akainu worry about it. Warring States was a little relaxed, and in the end, the 2 best candidates were selected. Looking at the information on the 2 candidates, his eyes twinkled. 2 candidates were chosen. One was a blind swordsman with a blade, and the other was a burly man. These 2 people are powerful monsters. Chapter 832 _ The first thing to do as a general. Marin Vando. We welcomed 2 guests. Do not. To be more precise, it welcomed 2 people who are about to become generals. A blind man was holding a saber and looked like a swordsman, with clogs under his feet. Just like an ordinary person, without the power of any strong man. Beside him, a burly and strong man with slightly narrowed eyes was casually looking at the whole picture of the Navy headquarters. Positioned directly in front. The Warring States came slowly, with a serious face, followed by several lieutenant generals. You 2, please come with me. Sengoku looked at the 2 people who had been introduced to the Navy headquarters and invited them solemnly. These 2 are about to become generals of the Navy headquarters. Naturally, they should be treated with caution. Soon. 327. Inside the marshal's office. The Warring States period officially gave the status of 2 generals, one is Fujitora and the other is Green Bull. That is the title of the Admiral of the Navy. 2. Now the Navy headquarters has promoted 2 of them to generals of the headquarters. I hope you will not disappoint the Navy's expectations for you. The Warring States said solemnly. He was afraid that these 2 generals would do something against the Navy headquarters. Moreover, during this time, it is necessary to observe these 2 people. At least, in a short period of time, it is impossible for them to participate in some extremely secret plans. Understood. Fujitora and Green Bull nodded and said. Neither of them thought that when they first came to the Navy headquarters, they would be treated as veteran generals. At the very least, they have to make some achievements before they are qualified to be trusted by the other party. Besides that, there are some things that I have to explain to the 2 of you. As generals, I believe that your consciousness is still very high. But there are some things that must be said clearly in person, I think. You 2, should you have time to listen to these things that I have introduced to you. Sengoku's face was calm, looking at Fujitora and Green Bull in front of him, said. These 2 are both terrifying monsters, there is no doubt about this. If the strength is not strong, he will not be selected. 12 people were selected, with Fujitora and Green Bull at the top, unshakable. Marshal of the Warring States period, please speak. Fujitora said with a serious face. Then I will tell you about it carefully. The Warring States opened their mouths and told a lot of things for the 2 generals. The responsibilities of the general and the words of brainwashing in various aspects are also continuously poured into the minds of the 2. Brainwashing is naturally inevitable. After all, the strength of these 2 generals is tyrannical, and they will definitely change their previous style. As a general, it represents the headquarters of the Navy, in the eyes of outsiders. The general of the headquarters is all the Navy. The actions of the generals will make people think that they are the orders of the Navy. Once the general makes a mistake, it will be a huge blow to the Navy headquarters. From now on, your identity will be the general of the headquarters. Therefore, when facing things, you must consider the interests of the Navy. Everything is based on the interests of the Navy. In the past, you did everything by yourself. But now, you have the status of generals. When you are outside, you are doing things on behalf of the Navy headquarters. Therefore, I don't need to say more about some things. Anything that involves the reputation of the Navy headquarters, I hope you will take it seriously. Chapter 832 is the first thing the general will do. Therefore, I don't need to say more about some things. Anything that involves the reputation of the Navy headquarters, I hope you will take it seriously. After a few words, Waring State's throat was dry, he exhaled heavily, and said, probably, that's all. We all know that in the future, we will naturally not lose the reputation of the Navy. The green cow opened his mouth, his voice a little rough and a little arrogant. After all, a monster with the strength of a general has his own arrogance. As long as you are clear, then I won't say more. Next, I will instruct the manpower to lead you to the general's residence. Now I am only a temporary marshal. The real marshal is already Sakaski's. So, when he recovers from his injury, he doesn't need to follow my orders. You just need to follow Sakaski's orders. As for me, I'm just an old soldier. Waring States laughed at himself and said slowly. Why does the Waring States Marshal do this? Over the years, you have calmed down countless turmoils for the sea. For all ordinary people, you have brought unimaginable blessings. Now you should retire, and the next sea, leave it to us. Fujitora said with great respect. For people like the Waring States period, he respected him from the bottom of his heart. When the other party was a marshal, he used a gentle but not lacking rigid style to sweep away countless pirates in the sea. Although there are some shortcomings, but more, it still brings a certain degree of stability to ordinary people in the sea. This kind of credit cannot be taken with just a few words. Such a person is also a role model in Fujitora's heart. Although his strength is strong, he still treats the Waring States with a certain respect and admiration for a veteran. Green Bull is more casual, but his character is like that. You can go, I have arranged the staff, and I will meet you later. Sengoku waved his hand and continued. Good. After the two nodded, they were about to leave. But at this moment, the Waring States spoke again. Wait a minute, there is one more important thing that you need to understand. This is also the first thing you should do as generals. Please speak. Fujitora and Midori were both deeply surprised and asked. We Marine Fando have a monster living here. So, please don't provoke him. Even if you encounter it at sea, you must not do it. In order to ensure misunderstandings, what you have to do is to visit the door. Let him know that our naval headquarters has replaced two generals. In this way, in future encounters, more or less, he will not kill you. The teachings of the Waring States language are sincere. Our strength, he dares to kill the killer. The green cow was a little unconvinced and said. 5.9 He admits that his strength is already top-notch. Listening to the tone of the Waring States period, it seems that you are not as good as the other party. Can the other party do it 100% if they want to kill themselves? He absolutely disagreed with this point, and he was quite confident in his own strength. Fujitora did not speak. He believed that it was impossible for Sengoku to not know their strength. But even so, if you still say this, you can prove it. The monster in the mouth of the Waring States period is really too big. The monster I'm talking about, he is, Li Yang. Waring States glanced at the green cow, slowly opened his mouth, and said. Immediately, the green bull shivered all over, his eyes widened, and he lost his voice. This monster Li Yang is in the naval headquarters. Now his somewhat fearful appearance, and the arrogant appearance just now, showed a completely opposite expression, as if they were two different people. Chapter 833 Door-to-door visit. Otherwise, who do you think I'm talking about? Besides Li Yang, is there anyone else who can make me wait so carefully? Even the four emperors are not qualified. That's why I asked you to keep this in mind. If you provoke him at sea, you don't know how you will die. This is not a joke, even me, I wouldn't dare to care about it. If I meet him at sea and a fight breaks out, 9 times out of 10, I will be killed on the spot and the body will sink to the bottom of the sea. The two of you together, maybe, he who can block one hand will say no tilde set. Sengoku glanced at the two of them and continued. This moment. Green Bull was really scared, and felt a little nervous in his heart. Who knows, this monster is actually in Marin Fando, is this too unlucky? Liang's reputation is far and wide, and the two of them are naturally familiar with this name. This is an out-and-out monster, the same name given by the world. Let's go, I'll take you to visit him. Avoid unnecessary troubles in the future. If you are killed by him in seconds, I'll have to worry about it. Warring States waved his hand and said slowly. He was really afraid that these two generals would not know whether to live or die, and they would do it without knowing Liang. If this is the case, the Navy headquarters will not be able to save these two newly promoted generals. Good. Fujitora thought for a while, then nodded solemnly. Although he can't see it, he has to get to know Liang. For the sake of the future, he had to put Liang out, so that the other party could get to know him a little bit. Do you really want to go? Green Bull was a little timid, subconsciously, he didn't want to see that kind of monster. He thinks that his strength is very strong, but if the person facing him is Liang, then his strength is not enough at all. Come on, don't act like a woman. Warring States raised his brows and said bluntly. Immediately, he ignored Lu Niu's timidity and left here with the two of them. ... Dong dong dong. Who is it? Liang stood up from the sofa with a calm face and opened the door. Into his eyes, a familiar figure appeared in his eyes. The people in front of them are naturally Sengoku and Fujitora and Green Bull beside them. After seeing Liang, Lu Niu's expression became more and more exaggerated, forcing a smile that was uglier than crying, and the sense of security in his heart was directly defeated. Standing in front of Liang, he always felt that he was very insecure. Maybe it was the reason why Liang's strength was so terrifying. Fujitora closed his eyes and felt the presence of the person in front of him. As a blind man, his perception is much stronger than his own. On weekdays, he also relies on his senses to walk and fight. This allowed him to develop a strong sense of hearing and premonition. But now, he can clearly feel that there is a person in front of him, and his body contains a very terrifying aura. The vitality is extremely strong, making him almost think that thousands of people are condensed in one person's body. The burst of vitality is quite strong, unfathomable. This is what Fujitora felt in his heart, and he immediately opened his mouth and said respectfully, presumably, this is Mr. Liang, right? Warring States, are you here? Liang looked at the Warring States period and asked inexplicably. These two are the new admirals of the Navy headquarters. So, I want to bring two people to your place to get to know each other. Avoid, there will be some unnecessary troubles in the future. If the two of them do something to you, it will be a big deal. Just kidding. Warring States did not hesitate, and spoke directly. The new general. Liang's eyes flickered, and he was still a little surprised by the statement of the Warring States period. This is, worship the mountain. However, he is not a navy, and he is not here to worship the mountain. After thinking about it, he could only think that the Warring States did not want to see the scene where he met these two generals and a war broke out in the future. So, bring someone over in advance to let him remember. In the future, avoid the possibility of hands-on. How scared is this guy in the Warring States period? Chapter 833_visit. How scared is this guy in the Warring States period? Liang laughed a little, thinking to himself. However, he is not going to expose the practice of the Warring States in person. Immediately, he put his eyes on Fujitora and Green Bull, and said with a smile, if you guessed correctly, the two are Fujitora and Green Bull, right? Ah! Sengoku, Fujitora, and Green Bull were all stunned. What's going on? Feelings, has the other party always known? You know. The Warring States period looked at Liang suspiciously, couldn't help but questioned. Guess. Li Ang used his usual style again, but if there is something that cannot be explained, he will directly apply this statement, and others will naturally be unable to refute it. Then you guessed quite well. 0. Warring States was a little speechless and did not continue to ask. Aside. Green Bull is a little more cautious, even more so than Sengoku and Fujitora. This made Li Ang a little puzzled, but he didn't ask much. In his opinion, the face of the green cow is still somewhat unfamiliar. And Fujitora's face, as usual, is characterized by being blind in both eyes. Therefore, it will be very easy to judge. Okay, I remember the two of you. I won't do anything when I see you in the future. Of course, the premise is that you don't take the initiative to provoke me. Li Ang smiled and said. Then let's say goodbye. The Warring States hurriedly announced their departure. Moreover, he led the Fujitora and Green Bull to quickly disappear in front of Li Ang. 0. It came and went in a hurry. The speed of this disappearance made Li Ang amazed. Isn't this Warring States too weird? Li Ang touched his chin, thoughtfully, and said to himself. But after thinking about it, he stopped thinking about it. Anyway, the plans of the Warring States period had nothing to do with him, and he was lazy to think about these small issues. The other side. After Sengoku, Fujitora, Midori and others left, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. The pressure is too high. The green cow's face gradually softened, and said. You seem too nervous. Warring States frowned slightly, looked at the green cow, and asked, what happened that made you fear him? It's just that from the rumors, I heard that his strength is very strong. Unconsciously, there are emotional fluctuations of fear in my heart. Green Bull gave a wry smile, and all his self-confidence disappeared. When he first came to the Navy headquarters, he was still very confident in his own strength. But after seeing Li Ang, all his confidence disappeared, and he didn't dare to pretend that he was invincible in the world. The Sengoku and Fujitora next to him have the strength to fight him. What's more, there is also a terrifying monster Li Ang. One hand is enough to suppress him and cannot resist. In front of such a monster, how could he dare to be proud? Indeed. Fujitora nodded in agreement. His senses are very sensitive, and when he stood in front of Li Ang just now, he felt a sense of oppression. With this sense of oppression, he was able to perceive that Li Ang's strength was far superior to him. Chapter 834-See you again. Inside the room. Li Ang lay on the sofa again, feeling the warm and comfortable atmosphere. His eyes narrowed slightly. It seems that I haven't seen Tautu and Tina for a long time. I don't know, what are they busy with recently? The corners of his mouth moved slightly, and he muttered to himself. Both of them are officers of the Navy, so naturally there are some things to deal with. During this period of time, there was no trace of the two women, which was excusable. However, when it comes to the two women, there is a knock at the door. Crunch. After Li Ang opened the door, he saw two familiar figures. Tautu and Tina rushed towards Li Ang and said softly, familiar taste. You two, still remember me? Li Ang smiled and said, hugging the soft body in his arms. They've been too busy lately. Tautu and Tina raised their heads, looked at Li Ang with big eyes, and said pitifully. No. Li Ang said with a serious look on his face. What? Tautu and Tina tilted their heads, puzzled. You are still developing. Li Ang showed a smile, feeling the softness in front of him, and his blood was rolling over again. Immediately, the pretty faces of Tautu and Tina turned red, and they gave a charming white look. Can't you be a little more romantic when we first met? Really, that's all in 3 sentences. In your head, what do you think? What is it? That's right, this guy's head is full of these filthy thoughts. Hancock walked out of the room with a pair of straight and slender long legs, which are enviable. The long legs without fat, bare feet, revealing white and pink insteps, are really cute. Long time no see. Tautu and Tina looked at Hancock and said with a smile. You two have grown too. Hancock stared at a certain position of the two women and said with a smile. No way. Tina blushed and retorted, Hancock, your figure is only obviously developed. I really don't know how the gap between people is so big. I feel that one of yours is bigger than two of me. Bullshit. Hancock's pretty face also showed too blushing, and he spat lightly. When Tina said so bluntly, she also felt embarrassed. However, she quietly glanced in front of her, and compared with Tina, she was a little thoughtful. It seems, is it really so? Your figure seems to be more developed than Tina and Tautu. In the past, it was a devil figure, but now, it has exceeded this category. But she didn't feel it, and she didn't expend too much effort when walking as usual. Is it because of your own physique? But it's true that the weight has skyrocketed. It's just that the long flesh doesn't grow on the stomach, but on some places where it should appear. Thinking of this, she became more and more shy, and her face flushed red. By the way, just now we saw the Warring States Marshal and the others fleeing. What's the matter? Tina's beautiful eyes flickered and she couldn't help asking. Oh, you said that just now. The old guy in the Warring States period brought the two new generals to me. I hope that I can keep my hands a little longer when we meet at sea in the future. Li Ang said casually. The new general. Both Tina and Tautu were a little surprised. But it is still in the process of cleaning up. The battle between Aokiji and Akainu is over, and the position of the marshal is already on top of Akainu's head and will not be changed. At this time, the position of the general will be vacant. Therefore, the position of the general must be supplemented. Unfortunately, Tautu, you haven't been able to become a general. Tina looked at Tautu next to her and said. Chapter 834 see you again. Tina looked at Tautu next to her and said. Don't be kidding, I'm still a long way from the position of the general. Tautu covered her mouth and chuckled, but she wasn't too disappointed. On the contrary, there are too many things to do to become a general. She would rather spend this time with Li Ang, so she is relatively optimistic without becoming a general. By the way, General Aokiji, where did you go? Still puzzled, Tina asked. I sent him away. Li Ang rubbed Hancock's black hair and smiled. Gone, you sent him away. Tina was stunned. Otherwise, why do you think it is recruiting two generals instead of one? It is because the positions of generals have already been vacant. Therefore, it is natural to add two more generals to make up the number of 3 generals. Li Ang said with a smile and explained. So it is. Both Tina and Tautu were stunned. But for Aokiji's departure, both of them, more or less, felt a hint of a storm about to set off. Tina and Aokiji joined the Navy in the same period, and the feelings are also more profound. Then, 2 wives, why are you coming to my place? Li Ang asked knowingly and laughed. Do you still need a reason to come here? Tina glared arrogantly at Li Ang, her beautiful eyes a bit shy. That's it. Tautu also spoke quickly and said. Since you have come to my site, you have to do things according to the rules on my site. Next, I hope you don't regret it. The corner of Li Ang's mouth raised an arc, said. You will regret it. Tina rolled her eyes and said. Little Nizi, I haven't seen you for a few days, but I'm a lot more daring. Later, I'll ask you to kneel down and beg for mercy, otherwise I won't let you go easily. And, the 2 of you. Li Ang looked at Tautu and Hancock and smiled. Finished talking. He threw himself all over and immediately hugged the 3 girls. For him, the weight of the 3 women was nothing at all, and he directly carried them into the room. Hancock, Tautu, and Tina blushed and huddled under the quilt. Their pretty faces were flushed, like timid little rabbits. Their necks were as white as jade, and they could reflect light, which was terribly white. Li Ang stood next to him and swooped down with a loud laugh. Suddenly, the 3 girls exclaimed. At the same time. 1.4 Li Ang turned into a primitive evil wolf, constantly rushing towards the white sheep, launching a storm-like attack. Are you asking for a detour? No. Then I can only continue to attack. You three, just wait. Quote. Haven't seen each other for about a month and a half. Let this fight be very intense. Moreover, the three women's combat effectiveness is also quite strong, and under Liang's strong offensive, they still did not beg for mercy. A few minutes later. Good husband, I surrender. This is Tina's voice. The first one who was defeated was Tina. Then, the second Hancock declared defeat. The last Peach Rabbit is still struggling to support. Inside the room. There were bursts of intriguing sounds, hovering in the room, and gradually dissipating. Chapter 835 _ The Waves of the New Era. Malin Fando has ushered in a noisy and lively period these days. Akainu became the marshal, and the news of Aokiji's departure from Marin Fando swept the audience. Everyone already knew the news that General Qingzi was dismissed from the position of general and left Marin Fando alone. Originally, the storm should be very strong, but then, this news was suppressed by another disappearance. That is, Fujitora and Midori become the new admiral of the Navy headquarters. This piece of news made people ignore Aokiji's departure. Visible. How much effort did the warring states spend to achieve this? Have you heard? We have 2 new generals coming to our naval headquarters. I have known for a long time that the strength of these 2 generals is quite terrifying. They are both monster level, and they are only stronger or weaker than General Kizaru. It's not, but the 2 generals were recruited from outside. In this case, there won't be some problems, right? I still feel a little overwhelmed. I don't know, but the people who want to come here will definitely have a way to deal with it. Quote. 08A sneeze. Kizaru sneezed, rubbed his nose, and looked helplessly at the bustling Malin Fando. Why did you get shot while lying down? The voice of the conversation just now reached his ears, making him very helpless. Why do you have to compare yourself with the 2 new generals? He is also very helpless, very helpless. Especially after seeing the fruit awakening of Aokiji and Akainu, why is he not convinced? Unless he himself can achieve fruit awakening, otherwise, with his character, he really does not dare to be arrogant in front of others. This newcomer shouldn't be able to awaken fruit. After all, in this sea area, there are still only a limited number of people who can awaken fruit. Kizaru's face was calm and he thought to himself. He also hopes that these 2 generals will not be able to awaken. In this way, as a general, he does not need to worry too much. Anyway, everyone has no fruit awakening, and he will not feel that he has lost to the 2. Not everyone, it's Aokiji and Akainu. Huang Yuan sighed and said. The former colleagues have now gone their separate ways. Akainu became the marshal, as his immediate boss. Aokiji, on the other hand, dismissed his position as a general and left Marin Fando. Of course. It's not that Aokiji dismissed the position of the general, but, in order to ensure the reputation of the Navy headquarters, the warring states period did not tell the truth to everyone. Anyway, he was very pleased that things were going in the direction he expected. The entire Marin Vatican was talking about what had happened in the past few days. Among them, the most frequently not discussed are naturally the 2 new generals. It is said that a man named Fujitora is a swordsman. Besides, his strength is quite terrifying, and he is a tyrannical monster recognized by the Sengoku Marshal. There is another one, Green Bull. His strength should not be underestimated, at least, he will never be weaker than Fujitora. These 2 generals fill the current vacancy in our naval headquarters. That's good, so the Revolutionary Army won't take advantage of it. Fortunately, no one came to attack it a few days ago. Otherwise, with the current strength of our Navy headquarters, it's really hard to stop it. The positions of the 3 generals are now filled. Next, even if someone attacks, we are safe and don't need to worry about anything. Quote. There was a lot of discussion in the entire Navy. The Navy who was walking around the streets and alleys, what Jonko talked about revolved around the two new generals. As for the news of Admiral Aokiji's dismissal. Chapter 835 _ The Waves of the New Era. As for the news of Admiral Aokiji's dismissal. This thing is gradually being forgotten by people. After seeing this situation, warring states also breathed a sigh of relief. As long as no one is making a fuss, then you can rest assured. Of course, not everyone doesn't care about the dismissal of General Qingzi. For example, lieutenant generals such as Flying Squirrel and Huo Shaoshan who support Qingzi seem a little lonely. During this time, they were silent and did not make a sound. On the contrary, the lieutenant generals under the hands of Akainu, Ghost Spider, Doberman and others, are in full swing. These days, the limelight is in full swing, and ordinary generals dare not touch their brows. As the earliest members of the Akainu faction, they naturally enjoyed extraordinary treatment. Now that Akainu has become a marshal, their status has risen. Although the position of lieutenant general has not changed, their future tasks and the chance of being promoted to general will also be much higher. After all, the marshal was already the Akainu they supported. Many things can be easily accommodated, which is understandable. In this regard, the people of the Aokiji faction chose to remain silent. In the same way, the departure of Aokiji also made many people who support Aokiji to take refuge in the direction of Akainu. This is, the time-conscious person. There is never a shortage of such people. After seeing the situation clearly, let yourself make changes immediately. Aokiji, whom they believed in at first, was defeated, and they believed that the only chance was to please Akainu, which was the best move. For such people, the first batch of people such as Flying Squirrel, Huo Shaoshan and others scoffed. These cartilaginous heads, they are very disdainful. Because Akainu became the marshal, there were many reforms in Marin Fando. Among them, there is a change in the concept of the Navy headquarters. Training the Navy today requires a belief. Pirates must die. This belief has become the primary goal of all navies. No matter who it is, all pirates are damned. In order to achieve the goal and eradicate the pirates at all costs, this is what 030 Akainu thought. In addition, the reputation of Fujitora and Midori also became louder. Everyone knows that there are two newly promoted generals, and those who are too powerful to enter the naval headquarters to officially station. General Aokiji, where did you go? The flying skier sighed and asked. I don't know. Huo Shaoshan also had a heavy face and shook his head. The General Qingzi they supported has been dismissed as a general, which makes them feel quite disheartened. In particular, the person who is now the marshal is Akainu. A man with a different philosophy from them, as a marshal, is afraid that they will have to suffer in the future. Let's take a step by step. I don't believe it, how dare he openly attack us? The flying squirrel's face was calm, and he said viciously. The person he was referring to was naturally Akainu. As a person from a different faction, he was naturally worried that Akainu would attack them. But when you think about it, it doesn't feel realistic. After all, Akainu is a marshal, and it is normal to push Aokiji away. But if they were to do something with them, there would be some lack of the heart of a marshal. A new era is coming. Huo Shaoshan raised his head and looked at the blue sky, said. White clouds fluttered. A new era is coming. Chapter 836 _ Rush to Daughter Island. The next day. In the morning, the sun is shining. The restoration work of Marin Vando is almost complete. Most of the broken things have been repaired. The rest, those buildings that have been completely destroyed, are directly abandoned and do not need to be rebuilt. The cost of rebuilding is too expensive, so only a few broken buildings are repaired. After all, no one knows whether Akainu will move the position of the Navy headquarters as a marshal next. If it was relocation, it would be a waste to make so many buildings. A ray of sunlight hit the window. Inside the room, Liang had already woken up, looking at the three girls Hancock, Tautu, and Tina lying beside him, smiling, looking at the delicate faces of the three girls, who were fast asleep, and the satisfaction in his heart was self-evident. When you wake up, you can see such a beautiful and moving daughter-in-law around you. What's not to be satisfied with? Huh. Hancock and the others gradually opened their eyes. With a pair of smart big eyes, they looked at Li Ang beside him for the first time, showing a sweet smile. Get ready, we're going to Daughter Island. Li Ang stood up, stretched his body, and smiled. Are you going to Daughter's Island? Hancock's beautiful eyes flickered, and he jumped up immediately, his feet twisted, and he fell. Li Ang's eyes were quick and his hands were quick, so he hugged Hancock's soft body and said angrily, "What's the hurry? It's been a long time since I went back, so I'm a little excited." Hancock blushed, and gradually stood up, said, "Really, I saw you were more excited than that last night." Li Ang smiled a little maliciously, looking at Hancock's delicate and pretty face, said, "What nonsense." Hancock blushed, spat lightly, Mamie rolled her eyes, and said dissatisfiedly. Thinking of yesterday's madness, her face couldn't help but feel hot. Although they are both old and married, but talking directly about these things with a cheeky person like Li Ang, her face still can't hang. Okay, get up, get ready. Tautu, Tina, you too. The Navy headquarters is very chaotic right now. It's business to go to Daughter's Island with me. Li Ang said slowly with a smile on his face. Yeah. Tautu and Tina nodded lightly, their faces blushing. Listening to the conversation between Li Ang and Hancock, they both felt a burst of shyness. After all, Hancock was not the only one who was excited yesterday. There are also two little girls, Tautu and Tina, who were excited at first, but gradually weakened after being attacked by Li Ang, and had to beg for mercy. Especially when they begged for mercy, their faces became hotter. Let's go, let's go. Tautu quickly stood up, put on his clothes, and hurriedly said. She was really afraid that Li Ang would continue talking, it was simply too beautiful. Yeah. Tina also got up quickly, without Li Ang's urging. This initiative made Li Ang a little suspicious. Could it be that the three little girls took the wrong medicine? Is the sun coming out west? Why, so self-conscious? Soon. It took about 20 minutes. Hancock, Tautu, and Tina were wearing clean clothes and standing in front of Li Ang. Their cheeks were still a little water-stained, and their pretty face was flushed, so Li Ang couldn't help kissing. Let's go. Chapter 836 / to the Daughter Island. Let's go. Hancock rolled his eyes and said in a charming manner, I just took a shower, and you all smudged your face. My face is spent, my wife is still so beautiful. Li Ang smiled and said. Poor mouth. Hancock's heart was sweet, his pretty face flushed, and he looked down at his toes. She was wearing red high-heeled shoes, a pair of long straight and slender legs, and under the dark purple cheongsam, she had a tall figure and a devil figure, and the two groups seemed to be breaking her clothes. Recently, due to the development of Hancock, the customized cheongsam is very loose. But she didn't expect that even loose clothes, under her development, once again showed the situation of breaking the clothes. This made Li Ang couldn't help but be amazed, the figure is too devilish. Next time, I'll have to customize more loose clothes. Li Ang looked at Hancock's figure and smiled. Ordinary people can't wear Hancock's clothes at all, it's too loose. But on Hancock, it seemed just right. Moreover, the most terrifying thing is that there is no bloat at all, but the charm of the devil. What is described by the front and back is Hancock's figure, which is perfect and impeccable. Tautu and Tina's loose clothes are not bad. Although the two girls have grown, they are not as obvious as Hancock's. However, if there is a chance, they will have to re-customize the two girls' clothes. Li Ang thought to himself and said with a smile, Let's go, get ready to set off and leave Marin Fando. Yeah. The three Hancock girls nodded slightly, and their expressions were also a little excited. After staying in Marin Fando for about half a month, once again, we ushered in the departure route. Immediately, Li Ang took Hancock's 3 daughters and gradually walked out of the door. After locking the windows and doors, he took the lock given to him by Qingzi and left the residence step by step. As for whether there will be thieves, Li Ang had never thought about it this way. Even a thief would certainly not be able to appear in Marin Vando. But if it was a thief inside Marin Vando, he would definitely not dare to take action against his residents. This is a taboo, but there is a big trouble. There is no way to provoke a terrifying big man like Li Ang in order to steal. A few minutes later, a group of 4 appeared at the edge of the coast. Peach Rabbit took advantage of his rights and obtained a warship, which was quite easy. Go. Li Ang led the 3 women to board the warship and personally controlled the rudder. Gradually, they sailed away from the edge of the coast of Marin Vando. A group of Navy looked at Li Ang and others leaving with a sigh of relief. Finally, send this monster away. Not far away. Looking at Li Ang's departure, Lu Niu also exhaled heavily. These 2.3 monsters have been in Marin Vando all the time, making him sleepless. As everyone knows, he is a person who needs a sense of security. His terrifying strength made him feel full of security. But he didn't expect that he would meet Li Ang here. As a neighbor next to this terrifying monster, he lived like a year. Fortunately, he finally left. Now, I can sleep more peacefully. The green cow wiped the sweat from his forehead and said in a low voice. This time, he came to the naval headquarters. Where does he have the demeanor of a general? It is simply that, shocked by Li Ang's existence, no one sleeps fragrant and often suffers from insomnia. I have lost several kilograms in the past few days. If this continues, I am afraid that his strength will fall to the bottom. But fortunately, seeing Li Ang leave, the huge stone in his heart was finally dissipated. Chapter 837-Beautiful and Moving Queen. Great Fairway. The sea is vast and boundless, the magnificent sea, under the breeze blowing, rippling waves, rolling and throwing to the horizon. A huge warship pushed aside both sides of the sea, raising waves of ripples. On the deck, Li Ang, Hancock and others were talking to each other, laughing, and the warm atmosphere made people fascinated by it. In fact, Marin Vando is not too far from Daughter Island. Probably, it can be easily reached in a few days at full speed. It doesn't take much time delay. By the way, I haven't seen those little girls for a long time. I don't know, but I'm still used to it on Daughter Island. Li Ang stretched his hands and said slowly. I know you have harmed a lot of girls. Tina Mei said with a bit of arrogance. Yeah, even you guys have been harmed by me. Li Ang said with a smile, and took advantage of the situation to hug Tina's slender waist, simply and neatly, taking advantage of the other party's body. The feeling is naturally self-evident. Tina's pretty face flushed and she struggled for a while. Seeing that it didn't work, she didn't say anything. It's just that Li Ang's hands are restless in her clothes, she feels a little awkward and strange, and there is not much resistance, so it's 08. They are both old and married, and Li Ang is used to these things for her. Perona, Khalifa, Shalulia Palace, Kurla. Except for Robin and Nami, basically everyone is together. Great reunion. Li Ang laughed, and the beautiful faces of the girls appeared in his head. The entire warship is constantly sailing. A few days later, the warship entered the area of the windless zone. Under the special equipment of the warship, it entered the windless zone and was still able to sail, which was very convenient. And soon, Daughter Island guards patrolling in the windless belt, and found the arrival of a warship. If they were pirates, they would be more vigilant. But if it is the Navy, they are just a little more cautious and treat it as an enemy. Stop! A woman in green clothes, looking at the warship, shouted. On the deck, with a sweet smile on his face, Hancock stepped on red high heels, and walked towards the bow of the boat, sexy and charming. When he turned around, his delicate face was full of momentum without any expression. The breath of the queen exudes. Igia is back. Hancock's voice is crisp and sweet, with a power that makes one cannot help but surrender. The temperament of the Queen is undoubtedly revealed. Yes, it's Lord Snake. Master Designer is back, hurry up, let everyone know. Master Snake G, back to our daughter island. A group of female warriors looked at Hancock's beautiful face with maddened faces and screamed. Hancock's beauty is still as good as ever. Li Ang said slowly with a smile on his face. My Lady Queen, it's so scary. Tautu and Tina looked at Hancock's back with beautiful eyes and said. The Queen's temperament really made them both envious. And, even, both of them were almost intoxicated. Lily. Li Ang coughed dryly and said, we're back, we should go to the shore to log in. Yeah. Tautu and Tina blushed and looked very shy. Hancock stepped on red high-heeled shoes, and a pair of long straight legs swayed in front of Li Ang, which really made his blood roll. He couldn't help but grabbed Hancock's waist and pulled it into his arms. Chapter 837 _ The Beautiful and Moving Queen. Hancock stepped on red high-heeled shoes, and a pair of long straight legs swayed in front of Li Ang, which really made his blood roll. He couldn't help but grabbed Hancock's waist and pulled it into his arms. What are you doing? Hancock rolled his eyes. Too beautiful to behold, said. You big goblin, you're so charming, you can't help it. Li Ang pecked at the corner of the opponent's mouth and said with a smile. Hancock's face was crimson, and her beautiful face showed a strange style. She was shy and had a unique flavor. Every move was well-deserved and beautiful. Every word and deed, every anger and smile, seems to be able to lead everything in the world, eclipsed. Especially after being nourished by Li Ang, Hancock is full of vigor and charm, and even Li Ang is a little bit hard to resist. If not take into account the environmental factors of the site. Li Ang really couldn't help it, so he did Hancock on the spot. Igia is the most beautiful. Hancock raised his head, revealing his white neck, and said confidently. Yes. Li Ang lowered his head, smelled the aroma of Hancock's neck, and took a bite. Hancock's whole body was jolted, his limbs were weak, and he was paralyzed in Li Ang's arms. He said coquettishly, I'm almost back, but I can't be seen now. You rascal, enough is enough. My Lady Empress, you are always majestic and majestic. Li Ang smiled and didn't let go, but he didn't stimulate Hancock anymore. Hancock's face blushed, but he gradually regained his strength. He put his arms around Li Ang's neck, and took the initiative to give him a mouthful of incense. He immediately moved his eyes and looked at the sea, not daring to meet Li Ang's gaze. At a glance, her small ears, which were as white as jade, were all red. Li Ang wiped the corners of his mouth, and the sweetness left him lingering. Ready to land. Immediately, he put his arms around Hancock, looked at Daughter Island, which was getting closer, and smiled. Tautu and Tina nodded lightly and said with a smile, I'm really curious, how many girls have been harmed by you, the big bad guy? No more, no less, 4 here in total, and 2 more who didn't come. Li Ang smiled and said. You're really good. Tina's pretty face flushed, and she was a little surprised. But when I think of it, Li Ang's personality charm is relieved. It is normal for a person like Li Ang to be worshipped by countless women in this sea. Here, always pay attention to strength. And Li Ang, who is standing at the top, will naturally become the target that countless people are chasing after, and the target that countless people admire. Let's be so. Li Ang smiled and said, it's very helpless, your husband, my lord, is so good. Shameless. Tina's pretty face blushed, and she said in a charming manner. The entire warship gradually approached the coast. Daughter Island is within easy reach. Come on, let's go down. Li Ang released his hands, grabbed Hancock's soft little hands, looked at Tautu and Tina, and smiled. Under his leadership, all the girls gradually got off the warship and officially arrived at Daughter Island. Is this the Daughter Island? This is my first time here. Tina's red lips moved slightly, and she said softly. Me too. Tautu nodded in approval, in the past, I couldn't get close to Daughter Island when I passed by here. Today, I finally logged into this mysterious island. Lord Liang, Lord Snake Ji. A group of female warriors came one after another, stood in front of Liang and Hancock, bowed, and looked very respectful. Chapter 838 _ see you again after a long absence. Well, go back to the palace. Hancock's pretty face did not waver. He looked at the female warrior in front of him, and said lightly. Her voice is crisp and clear, making people endlessly reverie, just like the cheerful chirping of birds, without any disgust, but hearing this sound has already been intoxicated. Judging by her voice alone, it can be inferred that this is the voice of a peerless beauty. Yes, Lord Snake. A group of female warriors nodded quickly and respectfully said. They followed behind Liang and others, their faces could not be concealed, showing excitement, and they expressed the most sincere emotions for Hancock's return. In front of the people, Hancock must also maintain a certain majesty. En route. Liang didn't interfere with Hancock's order either. He felt the soft little hand in his hand, and the corners of his mouth were slightly raised. Out of the corner of his eye, he could vaguely see the rosy touch in Hancock's ear. Obviously, the shyness in Hancock's heart still hasn't dissipated. However, in front of the people, she maintained her attitude as a queen. Tautu and Tina followed Liang's side, feeling the atmosphere of being respected, but there was no unexpected smile on their faces, and they seemed very friendly. Soon, a luxurious palace appeared ahead. Looking at the familiar palace, Hancock's beautiful eyes flickered, and his little hand shook. Liang noticed Hancock's mood swings. His index finger slid across Hancock's palm. Hancock noticed, turned his head to look at Liang, and saw Liang's blinking expression. Suddenly, Hancock's heart warmed, showing a sweet smile, and his heart was sweet. Her smile was as beautiful as 100 flowers blooming. We go home. Liang smiled, looking at Hancock, Tautu, and Tina, and said. Yeah. The three girls nodded slightly. Afterwards, Liang instructed a group of female warriors to do their own thing, and there was no need to accompany them into the palace. This is purely a waste of the time of these female warriors. They have not been so hypocritical. Lord Liang, Lord Snake Ji, we went back to our posts to patrol. The big beauty in green clothes lowered her head and said respectfully. Well, let's go. Hancock nodded and said. Immediately, a group of female warriors gradually left. And Liang also led Hancock, Tautu, and Tina into the palace smoothly. Inside the resplendent, yet clean and luxurious palace, it was quiet. I don't know, where are those little girls? Liang was looking forward to it, and said with a smile. His hearing is very sensitive, and soon, he sensed a direction, passed through the corridor with a smile on his face. The group of four successfully arrived at a study. I see. Khalifa is holding the document in both hands, wearing a black uniform, sketching out that perfect figure, wearing glasses, and reading the information on the document. And Perona was sitting on the sofa, her pink hair moved with the wind, and her delicate little face looked left and right. Shalulia Palace was sitting on a chair, her hands on the table, and she was integrating some information. She looked serious and had a sensible temperament. And Kurla was also looking for some information on the bookcase. Aside. Then my mother-in-law instructed, I am sorry to bother you a few. With the help of a few people on Daughter Island, there will never be any mistakes. Immediately. Liang was a little stunned. Chapter 838 _ reunion after a long absence. Liang was a little stunned. Including Hancock, the delicate face froze for a moment. What's the situation? Could it be that Shalulia Palace, Kurla, and Khalifa have already helped Daughter Island to do some affairs, and have done everything about Hancock? This mother-in-law seems to want to train the three to become leaders. Maybe the three of them were too serious and didn't notice the arrival of Liang and others. And the mother-in-law turned her back to Liang, so naturally it was impossible to find out. Only Perona, who was bored on the sofa, saw Liang for the first time. Her pretty face was dull, her pink lips were slightly parted, and she was speechless for a while. Then, she made an action that moved Liang a little. Perona rubbed her big eyes to make sure she was not mistaken. Isn't it an illusion? I don't know how many times I have had such an illusion. Perona's pink lips parted slightly, and she whispered to herself. Although her voice was weak, she could still hear it with Liang's hearing. I'm back. Liang's tone was inexplicable. Looking at Perona's sluggish and delicate little face, he smiled and said, "You are not hallucinating." Silence. Khalifa, Shalulia Palace, and Kurla also stiffened. The hands that were reading the materials were unable to move, and the book fell to the ground. Unexpectedly, the three girls looked at Liang's face with those big eyes. Moisture appeared in the eye circles were red, the red lips moved slightly, and they were silent for a long time. If it wasn't for the mother-in-law asking them to do some affairs, I'm afraid, their lovesickness would have been terminally ill. They haven't seen Liang for too long, so in their hearts, they all think that seeing Liang is an extravagant hope. This kind of demeanor made Liang feel distressed when he saw it. He didn't expect it to be like this. Wow! Perona cried directly, flew to Liang's arms, hugged Liang tightly, and used the gradually developing two groups to constantly squeeze in front of Liang. At the same time, the three daughters of Zalulia Palace, Khalifa, and Kurla also rushed to Liang's position, spreading their arms to hug Liang's body tightly to prevent the other party from leaving suddenly. This moment, Liang felt, could it be that the scumbag was referring to himself? Seeing the expressions of the four girls, he felt that a certain yearn in his heart was severely touched. Master, you are finally back. Shalulia Palace's eyes were red, and she couldn't help but said. You big bastard, you're back. Perona frantically used those red lips to pounce on Liang's face, wishing to be one with Liang. It can be seen how much she misses Liang, Wang Haohao. In a blink of an eye. Not only Perona, but also the three daughters of Khalifa, Zalulia Palace, and Kurla, all madly sent incense to the mouth. After a long absence, the mood is naturally a little surging. Moreover, this was the kind of excitement that could not be contained, which turned into surging love and released it to Liang. Feeling the mood of the four girls, Liang had mixed feelings, and Shenshiko took it and solemnly promised, I'm back. I promise that next time, I will bring you all with me, and I will never miss any of you. Khalifa and the others nodded lightly, their eyes turning red. Every day, the four girls fantasized that Liang would come back. However, it took so long to get what you wanted. Complain. From the beginning to the end, they didn't complain, they just complained about Liang, the big bad guy, and didn't come back. But when he really saw Liang, all the complaints dissipated. Instead, his love for Liang came out of his heart madly and could not be contained. Chapter 839_Want to give birth to a monkey for your husband. A leave first. The mother-in-law was slightly touched, and seemed to recall some past events, and gradually left the study. This moment belongs to Liang and the girls. If she interferes, I am afraid, she will really be punished. She knew how much Khalifa and others missed Liang. It was for this reason that she was thinking about something, intending to divert the attention of the girls. Unfortunately, the girls' thoughts on Liang continued to improve. Fortunately, Liang came back at this time. Otherwise, I'm afraid that the four girls are about to go crazy. You big bastard. Perona's eyes were red, and her little pink fist kept hitting Liang's chest. My fault. Liang put his arms around Perona, Khalifa and others, and said slowly. Next time, don't leave us alone. Khalifa's red lips parted slightly, and she said softly. Definitely. Liang nodded solemnly and said. Aside. Hancock, Tautu, and Tina looked at the picture in front of them, and their eyes were a little red, and they felt a little bit. How uncomfortable it would be for them if Liang had been away from him for so long. They did not disturb Li Ang's reminiscence with the girls. Suddenly, Li Ang looked at Hancock and smiled. Close the door. Yeah. Hancock nodded lightly, took a pair of long legs, and closed the door of the study tightly. Immediately after, with a smile on his face, Li Ang looked at Perona and the others carefully. It could be seen that Khalifa's body development was also quite obvious. Wearing a black uniform, she showed a strange style. Shalulia Palace was still wearing white clothes and looked elegant, which was completely different from the arrogant she before. Now she exudes an intellectual beauty. Kurla's figure has obviously improved a lot, and her delicate face is glamorous. And Perona, still a lovely little princess. After not seeing each other for such a long time, Li Ang found that the four of Khalifa had grown a lot. In particular, in terms of body shape, it is simply exaggerated. Being stared at by Li Ang like this, Khalifa and others also blushed and were a little shy. This big pervert. Kira blushed and said, "It's still so easy to be fascinated." "That's because my wife is so beautiful," Li Ang said with a smile. "There is no need for a process at all, and the love in the hearts of the girls is pouring out." And Li Ang naturally turned passive into active, and in an instant, Hancock, Tautu, and Tina also joined the battlefield. Li Ang fought against the girls alone, and he was not at a disadvantage at all. "My life is like a fairy. Do not. The gods have never been so comfortable. Beautiful wives and adults." Li Ang laughed, blood tumbling in his body. In an instant, the first target was caught. As the first target to be attacked, Khalifa was still wearing a uniform, showing her sexy charm to the fullest. Her pretty face was flushed, and she didn't dare to meet Li Ang's eyes. It may have been too long since he fought against Li Ang. Khalifa announced his surrender after an hour and was unable to continue the fight. He was lying on the sofa, his limbs weak. Chapter 839 Want to give birth to a monkey for your husband. And GT, page 1/2. Please click the next page to continue reading. It may have been too long since he fought against Li Ang. Khalifa announced his surrender after an hour and was unable to continue the fight. He was lying on the sofa, his limbs weak. The second target, Li Ang selected Zaluria Palace. Like a tiger, it launched an offensive. A few minutes later, Shalulia Palace and Kurla fell down. Their limbs were weak, and they had to surrender and beg for mercy. Perona plucked up her courage, blushing, and said, "I've decided, my husband, I'm going to give birth to a monkey for you." Huh. Li Ang was stunned, and the rest of the girls looked at Perona in amazement. "I'm serious." Perona's pretty face blushed, looking very shy. In fact, the matter of giving birth to a child did make Li Ang a little suspicious. It stands to reason that the women have been attacked by him quite a few times, but there is no sign of pregnancy. This is a little weird. Possibly, it has something to do with your body. When the body's genes are stronger, the probability of wanting offspring will be more difficult. And Li Ang's physical strength is naturally self-evident. If you want offspring, the chances are very low. However, Li Ang did not deliberately want children, and everything went with the flow. What's more, now he wants to go on an adventure with the girls to the new world. If you have children, you don't have this adventurous spirit. Therefore, giving birth to a child is not something Li Ang needs to consider for the time being. This time, Perona persisted for a long time before surrendering and begging for mercy, almost another 2 hours. When she surrendered, all her limbs exerted strength, and her lovely toes were raised. Next, the war is still going on. The entire study has been reduced to a battlefield. A burst of intriguing sounds lingered in the study room. Fortunately, the sound insulation effect here is quite perfect, so there is no need to worry that others will notice it. The next day, inside the study, all Hancock's daughters were lying all over the place with weak limbs. Li Ang was the only one left, who still had the upper hand. With a smile on his face, he said, "You guys are still defeated." "No." Khalifa blushed and regained some physical strength, said 630. In that case, you still have to be convinced. Li Ang smiled, and when he caught Khalifa as his target, he launched a fierce offensive. And Khalifa was very strong this time, and she seemed very strong at the beginning. But next, after 10 minutes, her strength was somewhat wilted. Another half an hour passed, her limbs were weak, her pretty face was flushed brightly, she nibbled her pink lips, and did not beg for mercy easily. This time, under Li Ang's strong offensive, she fainted directly. Very stubborn. Li Ang gradually slowed down his movements and whispered. After putting Khalifa in place, he changed his goal, and next, the girls were once again shrouded in war. Most of them recovered a lot of physical strength. But in front of Li Ang, he still looked pale and powerless. In no time, the entire army was wiped out. I'm still the winner. Li Ang smiled, holding Hancock in his arms, feeling the soft body, said. Hancock rolled his eyes weakly, leaned on Li Ang's shoulder, his black hair was thrown down, and he didn't have the strength to refute anything. This massive war. In the end, Li Ang was the victor, crushing the girls without any pressure, making them incapacitated, lying on the sofa with weak limbs, unable to move. Chapter 840-National Carnival. At the same time, the news of Li Ang and Hancock returning to Daughter Island swept the entire island, and many residents had already received the news and cheered. Sir Snake G is finally back, I'm so happy. Lord Li Ang also returned to Daughter Island. During this time, our Daughter Island was so peaceful. There is a big reason for it, because Lord Li Ang's reputation deterred the enemy. No, Mr. Li Ang has an extraordinary meaning to our Daughter Island. Only Lord Li Ang can let Lord Snake G promise each other. But by the way, when will their wedding be held? I'm looking forward to it. Quote. The whole Daughter Island, the whole country carnival. Received in the alley. The warriors in scantily clad shirts, showing off their powerful muscles, with the wild charm of women, holding wine glasses, cheered, and it was very lively. The atmosphere of the whole island was moved. Even the old-fashioned character of the mother-in-law showed a rare smile. She was relieved to see the prosperity of Daughter Island. It's a good choice for Hancock to be the wife of Lord Li Ang. She looked at the carnival scene on the street and felt a lot in her heart. The reason why Daughter Island is so peaceful is inseparable from Li Ang, which is beyond doubt. It is precisely because of Li Ang's shock that no one dared to invade the entire Daughter Island. Whether it is a pirate or a navy, when you come to this area, you have to be frightened. Li Ang's prestige is naturally self-evident. In the central area of Daughter's Island. Palace, hall. Sitting on the sofa, Li Ang looked at the weak look of the girls, smiled slightly, and said, "You guys, how are you? The war has passed, and the girls have not recovered. On the contrary, Hancock, Tautu, and Tina adapted faster. After all, there were more than 1 or 2 battles on the way from Marinfando to Daughter Island. And Perona and others have been staying on Daughter Island. They haven't done this kind of thing with Li Ang for a long time. Suddenly, a battle that is full of clouds and rain will definitely not be able to adapt too quickly. It's so lively outside Tilda." Tina's pink lips parted slightly, her eyes flashed a little, and she whispered. "Listen, they're cheering our return." The corners of Li Ang's mouth were slightly raised, and with his hearing, he could easily hear the outside voice clearly. He listened to the cheers and shouts of those female warriors without missing a word. The atmosphere of the whole island was very active. This made Li Ang feel more at ease. When I came to Daughter Island, I felt a different atmosphere. "Are we going out?" Tautu thought for a while and asked. Feeling such a lively atmosphere, they naturally went out to see it. "Of course." Li Ang nodded, stood up, and asked with a smile, "But you guys, do you still have the strength? Would you like to help?" "I don't want to." Kurla blushed and shook her head. Perona floated in midair, but she didn't need to walk. Pretty blushing, she laughed and said, still the most convenient for others. Come on, the island hasn't had a scene like this for a long time. Khalifa's delicate face also showed a smile after a long absence, like an iceberg melting. Soon. Chapter 840-National Carnival. Soon. Under the leadership of Liang, the girls gradually walked out of the palace. The street ahead was full of people, all cheering. The scene makes people blood tumbling. They are so enthusiastic. As the king here, Hancock also showed a slight smile, said. At the same time, as soon as they walked out of the gate of the palace, a group of female warriors discovered their existence and shouted even more excitedly. It's Lord Snake. Lord Snake is so beautiful. Compared with the past, the current Snake Princess is more attractive. If it wasn't for Liang, I might have really wanted to show my love to Snake. This is a beautiful girl from a good family, with love in her eyes, she couldn't help but say. These words were naturally heard by Liang, word for word. Let him look at Hancock strangely and say, Hancock, you big goblin. Even women are fascinated, it can be seen how great Hancock's charm is. Hancock is very calm, and she is not surprised by such a scene. After all, in the past, when she walked on the streets of Daughter Island, countless girls would wink. For her, these things were not too new. Instead, what made her care was what the woman said. Could it be that you have become more attractive recently? Hancock thought to himself, looking at Liang, his pretty face flushed. She thought of some reasons, but it was still hard to tell. Even some thoughts that slipped through her head made her cheeks turn red. Her delicate face was rosy, and she was indescribably beautiful. They are welcoming us. Liang smiled, looked at the group of women in front, and said. Daughter Island, apart from him, there really is no man. The people who revel here are all women. Most of the female warriors drink wine without any hesitation. Liang walked forward with the girls, and in the cheers, led the carnival atmosphere of the entire island. Some ships not far from the Daughter's Island gradually sailed past, and they all felt the shocking lively atmosphere. Some people are curious, some people are afraid, some people are surprised and so on. But without exception, they dare not approach the sea area of Daughter Island. This is Liang's territory, and no one dares to act wild here. Therefore, a strange sea appeared. In the waters that are relatively close to Daughter's Island, basically no one dares to fight here. Therefore, this place is given a name, the only safe zone. Whether the Navy or the pirates, here, each chooses to be treated calmly, and there is no conflict. Many times, some pirates come to this safe sea area in order to avoid the pursuit of the Navy. The Navy could only stare, not daring to act rashly. Of course. There are also times when the pirates are driven out by boats from the Daughter Island. But everyone knows that this area of the sea is an absolutely safe area. Even the 4 emperors would not dare to act rashly here. The entire Daughter Island, in the carnival, gradually spent a day. Night. The palace is still brightly lit. The battle between Liang and the girls is still going on. The stars are sparse in the night, and the stars twinkle on the edge of the sky, which makes the crescent moon appear even brighter. The temperature of the air gradually drops. Daughter's Island at night is extraordinarily peaceful, in contrast to the lively atmosphere during the day.